72 damage both times. Both times he left damage on the board.
Oh no! Where is Card's green? Right, but where is Card's green? He got there! Oh. Sick! It's so powerful, all these rushes. I can't even believe the value he's got.
Lamby with a pop-off, well deserved. He stays in for another series.
Welcome everyone to the final day of Hearthstone Grandmasters playoffs for this season. Come the end of these 3 series of Hearthstone, we will know the first player going through to the World Championships this year. And given that this is Asia Pacific starting off the broadcast, we cheer get the pleasure of finding out the absolute first player before Europe and Americas get to find out the, less important second and third players going to the World Champs too.
That's right, save the best for first. APAC is always the first to know, and we do have 4 incredibly talented players duking it out today for that right to represent APAC through at the World Championship. Derek, it's the very last day of the regular Grandmasters season ever. I don't know if I can handle it.
I know, it's crazy. It's been like almost half of Hearthstone's entire competitive ecosystem at this point, and yet it feels like only yesterday that we were jumping into Grandmasters for the first time. And we have such a perfect mix of players here in Asia Pacific who have joined us at all points along the Grandmasters history. Alutemu, right from the start, has been with us from the get-go. Mighty only joining us this season, and yet still making it through to the semi-finals of the playoffs. Lamby Series and Alan joining us along the way as well. But before we get into our players, the deck lists, all that goodness, we're going to take a look at, of course, the format for playoffs. It is just a straight-up single elimination at this point, now that we are in the top 4. All of our players have to win 2 series in a row, or one of them will. They have to win 2 series in a row to go to the World Championship. But 1 loss and they are out. And of course, in Conquest, it ends up in a situation where you have to win with all 3 of your remaining non-banned decks, which I think across all regions has led to a bit of an upset in terms of what people might have expected the standard lineup to be.
It's true. I think in APAC, at least, we do have an even split between the standard lineup and the counter to the standard lineup in our top 4, 2 and 2, which is sort of where you expect the Conquest meta to land most of the time. But it's not always an even split, right? Oftentimes, those with just the 4 best techs come out on top. But it seems that there really is some teeth to the aggro strategy for this particular end of meta.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in it. I think over in APAC, over in Americas, as I was looking to make my predictions, there's no regular druids. It's all aggro druids in the top 4 over there, which is pretty crazy to see. Some players, like I believe Naugadan and Dimitri Kazal, going with a slight hybrid lineup still with a control warrior in there. But here, like you said, it's a real split down the middle in Asia Pacific, with Alutemu and Lamby Series going with the standard ramp druid, demon hunter, and then a couple of other decks to round it out, whereas Mighty and Alan full on aggro to try and counteract that strategy. And of course, the compensation that our players will get should they make it through to first place will be $2,633, but much more importantly, the spot at the World Championship at the last possible opportunity for all of our players. Aside from Mighty able to squeeze through into the top 4 for Grandmasters last call, where we may see him next season. But for the other players, it's going to be their final shot at the trophy.
It really is do or die for 3 out of our 4 competitors, and that really highlights the binary nature of this weekend. You make it to Worlds or you don't. Unless you're Mighty, there is no second chance through the Grandmasters system. You could say there's still a chance through the Masters Tour system and the seasonal championships, but there's only 1 more Masters Tour for this first summer championship left, and then we have another 3 starting from scratch to determine who makes it through the fall championship. So for everybody involved, they very much want to book their ticket to Worlds right here and now today, Derek. I am so excited to see who it will be.
Me too. I think all of our players are just incredibly deserving, having gone for a wide variety of different strategies along their time in Grandmasters. And even if they are newcomers, as I said, like Mighty, I think so far they've proven they can play at the top level. But as I was iterating to death yesterday. Our players do need to be making sure that they are not letting the nerves get to them. I think that has really been the biggest detriment to players in Asia Pacific, is that overall the play is very, very high level. We've crowned the last 2 world champions, but if they cannot get their heads in the right space and let the nerves get to them, we have seen Gia some truly disastrous plays, even just yesterday when Oka Shinsuke unfortunately missed a rather obvious lethal, and in the end was not able to qualify through in the first match through to the winners bracket, nor his final match either.
Right. I think he said on Twitter that he missed lethal about 4 times throughout the day. We only spotted 2 of them. I don't know if he was exaggerating, but he was at least happy to know that in the last series of the day, he cleaned it up, and he can definitely hold his head high. It was a pretty good way to end out his performance in Grandmasters. But right now, the spotlight is on these 2 players right here, Lambi Series and Mighty. Mighty definitely got the easy way through to the qualification of today because he was seated at the winners bracket, having the second best overall performance in the first 3 weeks of the season. And even though Lambi Series took it down all the way to a game 5, Mighty scraped it out in the end there. Lambi also sharing on social media that he felt there was a better line he could have taken when the Scabs was stealthed, maintaining some of his performers instead of blowing it up with Immolation Aura.
Yeah, that was the thing we were thinking about, of whether he should have gone for Fell Screen Blast plus Hero Power. It wouldn't have immediately pushed more damage, but like you said, stuck a couple more 1-1s, which could have offered him lethal next turn. But he did then lose against Mighty and head down to the decider match to face against either Oka Shinsuke or Shaxi. And it looked at the start very much like it would be Shaxi who would be going through to the decider match. But after the Druid finally took a win from Oka Shinsuke, Kazakhstan doing what we all know it can do. And in the end for Shaxi as well. Unfortunately, not able to capitalize on a missed lethal, as we said, from Oka Shinsuke, leading to a situation where he just narrowly was unable to get a win with his Paladin.
That's right, and that means that at least one of the aggro strategy players in APAC did not make it all the way through. And I think that's thanks in large part to the types of druids that are actually left here. When we were looking at the top 8, Chonsu and Possessi had the Kazakhstan druid without the other dragons at the top end. A lot of armor gain in the beginning, but perhaps not the best anti-aggro build. However, the 2 standard lineup players left in Lambi Series and Alutamu do have that Raid Boss Onyxia build. So I feel that they still have some game against the Trogs on the other side. It's not going to be quite so one-sided as we saw from Alan on Friday.
And there it is, the final moments of the day as Lambi Series was just able to clutch it out, leading us to the 2 sides of the brackets being pretty divided up, as we were saying, in terms of the lineups here, with Alutemu and Lambi Series going with the standard good deck strategy, Kazakhstan Druids, Fell Demon Hunters, Rally Priests on both sides, I believe, and then a Warrior for Alutemu and a Rogue for Lambi Series. Both have a couple of good anti-aggro decks, as we've talked about, in the form of Warrior, especially for Alutemu, Rogue not bad either for Lambi Series. But Mighty and Alan have got themselves 2 slightly different strategies as to how they're actually building their aggro decks, I should say, with Alan feeling like he's going all in on the anti-druid strategy, whereas Mighty taking a slightly more balanced approach. Honestly, both of which will be equally unpleasant for Alutemu or Lambi to face in the finals.
Yeah, it's true, because while we do have that even 2-2 split of aggro and standard lineup, it has fallen in such a way that our bracket has the 2 standard lineup players facing each other in the semis and the 2 aggro players. And then within the standard lineup, there is that slight difference you pointed out of the Warrior for Alutamu as opposed to Quest Rogue for Lambi. And then on the other side, there is a difference of Shadow Priest for Alan, whereas it's a Face Hunter for... No, sorry. Quest Rogue for Mighty. Mighty also has that one deck in Quest Rogue that I would say is more mid-range than aggro, but still has some pretty good matchups in Demon Hunter if he does manage to make it to the finals and face either of these 2 players here right now. But for our first semi-final, no surprise to see Druid banned on either side, and sort of leads us to the question of who comes out on top when we factor in the head-to-head of the Warrior and the Quest Rogue. And in that specific matchup, for sure Warrior is in the lead, but when we take a look at how Warrior interacts with Demon Hunter, perhaps, maybe Alutamu would rather have had a Quest Rogue.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of good matchups, a couple of bad matchups. And I think for the Control Warrior, because it ends up being 2 good matchups into Priest and Quest Rogue and 1 bad matchup into Demon Hunter. I want to say that favors Alutemu, but then, you know, if we look at the Quest Rogue on the other side of the Lambi series, he also kind of ends up with 2 good, 1 bad, with good against the Demon Hunter, pretty good against the Priest, and obviously bad against the Warrior. And I still think as long as Alutemu can get himself a decent matchup with the Warrior and doesn't just give the Demon Hunter a free win, which would be the disaster scenario, then he should be in a good spot overall in the series. Starting things off, however, with his Rally Priest here, which I think Alutemu has been playing very, very well on. One of the earliest adopters of this deck in Asia Pacific, because, you know, it's all very well now to bring it this week after Gabby said it's the best deck in the game, maybe after Druid, after winning a Masters Tour. But a few of the Japanese players were piloting it just before Gabby, I think, clocked onto its power level. And so Alutemu can hold the flag of being a Priest hipster, which is worth maybe not as much as a spot in the World Champs, but something at least.
I mean, with Gabby, anything can be the best deck in the game, right? He was also tweeting about his best win rate with Quest Rogue, putting to rest any doubts from other players in Europe, maybe. But of course, that Rally Priest is one of the breakout decks of the recent few weeks. It does have some weaknesses here and there to aggro, but I'm really glad that we get to see it in the Demon Hunter matchup, because this one went very, very one-sided the last time we saw it. Just minion going unanswered by the Demon Hunter and then getting buffed and buffed and buffed until it was just straight up lethal. And we know that Alutemu is something of a Sethic whisperer himself, just getting unlimited powered fortitudes. I wonder if he can pull something out the bag this time once again, because Lambi is also known for some creative play on Demon Hunter, putting together a very unexpected win condition just yesterday.
That's right, yeah, getting himself a, 4-mana Jace, I think it ended up being when you factor in the discount from Quest and Skull of the Manari. Skull of Gul'dan, sorry, that would be an entirely different deck. Oh, I miss it so much every day. Getting himself a very, very early Jace lethal. But I think that coincidentally is something that I really have appreciated about Lambi series Demon Hunter gameplay. We've seen it from a lot of the players, and I think that's something that's really evolved as the deck has become more practiced with, more appreciated, more second nature to our players, is correctly identifying the win condition and when to break that as well. Because Lambi series, I remember in a game yesterday, he was setting up for this Fellfire Deadeye combo with the expendable performers for most of the game, realized it probably wasn't going to happen and started using them for tempo, broke the deck up, broke up the combo, and instead tried to go for a more ragtag win condition with Jace later on in the game. And I think that kind of creative thinking, constantly objectively evaluating the state the game is actually in, is a very, very important factor in being able to take down a flexible deck like the Rally Priest that we see here.
Very, very salient points. And in terms of getting rid of the first threat that the Rally Priest is able to put forward, generally Sethic is deal withable by the Demon Hunter.
Yeah.
Which would imply just like a Chaos Strike or a Furion, a hero power, maybe a pre-equipped Warblades. But when it's the Nazmani in particular, that 5 health breakpoint is usually so problematic for the Demon Hunter to deal with. However, Lambi has Fel Barrage, which combined with hero power can even meet that 5 health breakpoint. But he's going a step further of even coining out the Fellfire Deadeye, preloading some form of threat here that also benefits being able to play the hero power alongside Quest and Illidari Studies the next turn, and lets him trade down the Sethic. It's such a nice play.
Yeah, like I said, instantly breaking up the combo, right? It's so often necessary to hold on to the Deadeye plus Performers combo to get a surprise win around turn 8 or 9, but it's so often not necessary. And I think Lambi series has been, as I said, able to take a really good objective look at when that is and is not the case. And now, as he is rewarded with just seeing a Sethic played out, I mean, he doesn't even have to expend the Fel Barrage now, right? He can just go hero power plus the Quest, maybe, plus Illidari Studies, but even that is probably fine to just save the mana because it will be difficult to get what he discovers over to the left-hand side of his hand.
It's true that Performers blocking it does make the turn a little bit awkward with the mana floated, but it's fine. The fact that he's ahead on board means that Alutemu is always going to have to worry about that Deadeye before he plays a threat, or there's essentially 3 damage that is already dealt to whatever minion he plays from the 2 attack on the Deadeye and the free hero power. Without Shadow Word Devour, there's not a great way to punish it at the moment. But with that pickup of palm reading, Alutamu does give himself the potential to set up a bigger Nazmani turn rather than just leaving it to almost certainly die played out for tempo this turn.
Yeah, I mean, we say almost certainly, it probably is. I wonder if he hadn't found the palm readings, if he just would have tempoed it out. Because waiting until like turn 5, and then you can only go like Nazmani plus Power Word, Nazmani plus Bless, still a very killable size. But now, I'm pretty sure I just absolutely agree with you that we do need to see some kind of a play with palm readings and set up for just a bigger Nazmani pop-off on turn 5.
In terms of best outcomes from palm reading, even a Holy Smite would be great here for Alutamu just to be able to get rid of the Deadeye. I think Devour is ideal because there's no way for Demon Hunter to buff or heal their minions, I don't think. So this Deadeye is effectively at 1 HP for the rest of its tenure on board. The Nazmani hitting the board for tempo is something you consider, I would say, if Alutamu had a Raise Dead or Rally available to him. But because that's not there, if he just leaves it to die, there's hardly a guarantee that he can have one of those crucial platform minions to build off of and really get value from all of his hand, which is buff spells at the moment. So he does go palm reading and picks up Horn of Rathian, which is great because he can continue to find minions, ideally Drekthar, and thin the deck towards that rally.
Interesting spot here for Lambi series where Illidari studies into exactly Spectral Sight is good, right? We'd happily make that play if we knew that Spectral Sight was in the pool, was inside the Illidari studies. But on 3 mana, even though he's offered 3 3-mana options, interestingly enough, there's not many like tempo options that you're happy to just throw down if you miss on the card draw. Like the Dreadlord's Bite, it's a 2/2 weapon. It's okay. You probably end up picking it and equipping it here in this instance just to proactively spend the mana. But it's not fantastic, right? It's not like on 4 mana where you can hit Star Student Stelina, you can hit the 5/4 that summons 2 1/1s as well. It's a little bit of an awkward turn for Lambi series to go for it, but I do agree that he probably had to there to spend his mana, and again, probably made the right choice.
Yeah, I think in terms of non-card draw options that would have been convenient to play on curve here, it's really just the Gunnar Glavesmith, which is also just not amazing for the stats you get. I think the pick of the Dreadlord's Bite I agree with. Also, just looking at the context of Magtheridon in hand, he is very unlikely to get the actual outcast value from the weapon if he had held on to it. So you can kind of just say this is a 2 damage weapon I have preloaded. He can on turn 4 theoretically play Magtheridon, and then on turn 5 theoretically go Immolation Aura, then Fel Barrage to deal with 2 tokens, and the Swing to deal with the last token. So it's actually a 2-turn Magtheridon setup. Obviously, kind of flimsy because Alutamu can buff some minions, but that's really the only thing that Lambi's hand is doing at the moment, so I don't fault him for going for it. With this Glide pickup, though, he does have an option to finally progress quest now, and I suppose reset the discounts on Alutamu's hand. It's still a net benefit to Lambi on average.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what kind of a read he can get on Alutamu's hand, because he knows one of the spells is randomly generated, which is, you know, I would say probably about below average compared to a card in your deck. So it's not a great hand to glide, but he does know that everything is discounted, which is the really big one here. And so that allows for much bigger pop-off potential. And so even though it means leaving up a Nazmani on this turn, whereas he could have just gone for a clean Fel Barrage to finish it off, he decides it's more important to deal with the discounted cards and is met with a hand that I don't think he will be too happy to see, because this just looks pretty strong.
Oh, it's strong from Alutamu, but that's a 5-mana Kurtrus for Lambi, and I think he's attacked every single turn prior to this, so that's going to be pretty big bats, which can help him deal with whatever the Drekthar sends forward this turn if Alutamu wants to play it. But actually, it's only going to pull the 1 Sethic, right? Because Nazmani on board, Nazmani in hand, and 1 Sethic was played at the start of the game. Is that worth it to Alutamu? Remains to be seen. He doesn't have a Rally or Raise Dead, so maybe he would rather save the Sethic for later.
Yeah, in which case we could consider palm readings to set up on this turn. We could also consider Power Word Feast as he's going for here, which has a very nice effect of obviously double discounting the hand, thus making it much more likely that a Sethic pop-off turn will be available next turn. But also just gets a big heal, right? This is a much, much more difficult board to deal with now. And there are very, very few hands that Demon Hunter could hit to be able to actually answer both of these Sethics. However, that's exactly what Lambi series has, I believe, with 2, 5, or now 6 attack demons off of the Kurtrus Demon Render. It is the perfect turn for him here, my goodness.
Yeah, that is just nuts, being able to play the Kurtrus early and having attacked every single turn prior. He gets not only a clear, but to maintain a minion that's out of range of Shadow or Devour, and outside of exactly Holy Smite or generated spells. It's just such a difficult prospect for Alutamu to deal with. Gets the Sethic, which we knew was the only outcome here, and probably goes with Renew on his minion. He needs generated spells.
Ooh,
Less keeps
Rally.
the train rolling, but Rally is really good. Probably just
I think
that. Yeah.
with a palm in hand, we got to set up for a bigger play next turn, and that's exactly what this does.
Are palms in your hand part of your hand?
They are in your hand. Yeah, that's an interesting philosophical question. What's the sound of one palm clapping?
Oh no, I'll never be able to sleep tonight. Well, does the turn end with Power Word Feast or Palm Reading is the question. Well, the Power Word Feast played here does just regenerate another spell because you have the Sethic, so you can still get maximum discounts from the Palm Reading in theory.
Okay, that's a nice one to get, just to keep the train rolling for next turn. Alutemu really just needs to think carefully now about when he's going to start going in, because, you know, he would like, I think, ideally to wait until turn 8, just have a little bit more mana spare, but he's not necessarily going to have all the time in the world. Although Lambi series has used the Deadeye, which means his, like, surprise lethal potential is quite low, he's still chugging along. He's completing quests. He's played Kurtrus. He could be playing the Kurtrus quest reward in just 1 or 2 turns' time. And so Alutemu really does have to carefully consider that risk versus reward. How quickly do I go in, which means I'm doing it before my opponent gets quest completed? Or is it more important to do it more powerfully a turn later?
And that Chaos Strike for Lambi off the first Spectral side is so huge. It means he gets to not only progress quests, but also get rid of the entire board. This last bit of hesitation here, I think, is whether he wanted to go trade into Sethic and then Immolation Aura and then just smack the Drekthar, or just use the hero power. And I think that is better, just to use the hero power. It's the same outcome. That Immolation Aura definitely still has utility with the talented Arcanist, either of them on the next couple turns, because Lambi is actually in a spot where he's given Alutamu such a hard time to have a full pop-off turn that it looks likely that if Alutamu wants to pop off, he has to take a whole turn to set up a board prior, which might not have enough stats to outlast an Arcanist Immolation Aura. And then Lambi can even try and just go for a full control route here.
But if Alutemu does just take this route it looks like he's going for here, where he's just trimming his hand, like he's almost tending to a bonsai tree, right? Where it's just slowly making it more and more perfect, more and more beautiful. Lambi series is going to come in with the chainsaw that is Glide and just completely obliterate all his hard work here, because, you know, set up all you like for a good rally. This double jump could just delete all of that effort.
Horn doesn't draw anything anymore, does it? So probably a Renew just to go alongside your Rally turn. That's an instant 0 cost spell to get the Sethic value and the discounts from the Nazmani. It is a very trim bonsai, which is ready to grow into a large, large tree. But that's a Glide!
That's the one. Yeah, I think was it guaranteed, or did he have another Spectral Sight in the deck? Either way, it's there, and he's trimming his own hand now, getting rid of the Fell Barrage, getting rid of the Fury, setting up for a stronger Jace once that does come down, and just stamping all over Alutemu's hard work.
The chainsaw. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was a guaranteed Glide there, and Alutemu getting a taste of his own medicine. Glide Man getting hit hard, but he does pick up a Rally. Not all hope is lost.
this can do something. You know, he really wants a Gift of Luminance. Gift of Luminance first to be able to increase the power of these Nazmanis. But it's still getting something on board. There's the potential that Lambi Series won't be able to answer this 7-7 on board if he wants to play Kurtrus as well.
Apotheos is too expensive here. Imagine if the discount had landed straight away on that. The turn would be so much different at the end, so much more stats. But Alutamu still has a couple spells to keep the train rolling. Flash Heal, one more generated Sethic spell, or if he wants, he could start with the Insight, which draws nothing at this point, just to try and hit a discount on something else. Because if you start Flash Heal, then you might land a discount on the Insight, which is not really useful. Okay, Ray's dead.
Not a terrible card to get, but again, it's not game-winning at this point in the game, is it? He just needs more mana available, and Lambi Series, I mean, honestly, he's not a million miles off of just straight-up lethal here. This Jace has already got, like, 2 Chaos Strikes and a Fury in there as well, and a Fel Barrage. Like, I don't think it's lethal, but it's getting close.
I don't think so either. So if he wants, he can take just a full turn to clear the board of the performers. He can weave in the hero power and then Fury Jace next turn. I suppose it's the same if you Fury this turn or hero power Jace on the next turn, but clearing the board, I just don't think there's many ways that this goes wrong unless Alutamu has exactly second rally and a copy effect. And the way his turn panned out kind of made it look like he didn't have the copy effect. It is a much more lackluster pop-off than he would have wanted. And Lambi here not getting the full amount of performers, instead prioritizes having that Arcanist go face. And I agree with that assessment because you just want the maximum damage now to set up for the Jace lethal next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also just means there's less minions on board for a potential Devour, which is, I think, also very smart, as that could be a way he could get a high health enough minion so that the Fel Barrages would not necessarily be able to connect face as consistently off of the Jace. Alutemu, again, now put pretty much in a corner here. He doesn't have any choice but to hope that it's just the most miraculous priest turn you can imagine. Double Sethic, not ideal. But if he can just keep chaining heal effects, I don't know. Like, is he going to send this Renew Face instead of onto a minion?
Oh, it's such a tough decision because he needs generation, but he also needs mana.
Yeah.
I think maybe, okay, one Sethic, Renew on the Sethic. So you get 2 spells, but you save the 2 mana having spent on the Sethic itself. These are terrible, though.
Against all odds, does technically deal with everything on the other side of the board, but it's the biggest overkill I've ever seen in my life, and I think that will just lock out the game in Lambi Series' favor.
Yeah, Fury into Jace. Even without the Fel Barrage damage, this Jace is going to replay a Chaos Strike and a second Fury at the minimum. And that means that Lambi Series takes an unfavorable matchup, and the entire landscape of the series changes because of that. We've talked about how in these mirrors of the standard decks, it often feels like the Demon Hunter becomes the problematic deck. Maybe not so much true in this particular matchup because Alutemu does not have Quest Rogue. He's not quite so hard targeted on Demon Hunter, but it's still a big deal to get that win on the board.
Absolutely massive, and very much at the hands of some clever play from Lambi Series. That coin Felfire Deadeye on turn 1, right at the start of the game, when generally the only play you will ever see is either Quest or Hero Power for this version of Quest Fel Demon Hunter, was absolutely inspired. It allowed him to kill off the Sethic. It meant that if he'd wanted to, he could have killed off the Nazmani as well. But he even deviated away from the plan he set up at first, where he went for Glide instead to complete his quest, which was, again, I think another instance of very, very good understanding of not just playing as the defender all the way throughout the game. You can't just remove everything Priest does in hopes to get there. You have to also proliferate or propagate your own game plan at some point along the way. And that's exactly what Lambi Series did, leading to a very important win for the Demon Hunter, now left with only his own Priest and his own Rogue, which, if nothing else, if we want to find some solace for Alutemu after taking a loss, does leave nothing but good matchups now for his Control Warrior.
That is true, although I will say that the Control Warrior versus Rally Priest matchup I haven't had too much experience on. It's just more me going off of the idea that Priest is heavily unfavored against Warrior when it's the Miracle version with the Malagos. The Rally Priest does have potentially infinite value, but it's going to have to be very good generations, I would say, to get there against Warrior, because even if you do have like double rallies, double raise dead, the Warrior on paper has enough removal to deal with all of the base deck threats and base deck regenerations of boards. There is, however, other things that the Priest can generate to try and take this to the late game. If they get their hands on a Draconic Studies, maybe that could turn into a Kazakhstan battle. On average, I think the Warrior still comes out ever so slightly ahead because they do have Kazakhstan and should be able to play it earlier and then just get a lethal that way rather than going for pure attrition. But we can talk about that matchup a bit more later because Lambi is on the Quest Rogue instead, which is decidedly unfavorable for the Rogue.
That's right, yeah. Priest versus Warrior is a difficult matchup to play, and then you lose. Rogue versus Warrior is an easy matchup to play, and then you lose. You just play out all your cards, hope that somehow they don't have the removal necessary, and then when they do, you pack up and you go to the next game. I've just seen time and again, this matchup feels absolutely miserable. I am oversimplifying it somewhat. There are a bunch of tricks that you can try to pull off. It's all about finding that perfect sweet spot between overextension and underplaying your hand, where you're not putting forward enough pressure. Because, you know, if you end the turn with just 2-3 attack on the board, the opponent's just going to draw cards. They're just going to hero power. They're just going to get closer to playing Kazakhstan. But if you play too much, they use one AoE removal piece and you've burnt through way too many of your threats. And so I think Lambi is the kind of player who can find that sweet spot very, very nicely. But nonetheless, Alutemu has just been a staunch believer in Control Warrior in one form or another throughout most of Grandmasters, honestly. He's always found some way to make this deck work, and I think he's played it impeccably throughout his run in GM.
That's right. We have seen at least once in APAC Grandmasters this season, though, the matchup going in the favor of the Rogue. And I think in that particular pan out, it was heavily influenced by the fact that the Warrior just could not get draws out of Outrider's Axe in the early game. If Lambi Series finds himself a position where his quest completion can be off of operatives, minions that have higher than 3 health, that suddenly can starve Alutemu of resources. It's not often that that happens because a lot of the early SI minions do have 3 health or less, the Skulker, Agent, and the Smuggler. So it's very difficult to make sure that that Outrider's Axe cannot get value, but it's always something to keep in mind. If he has a spot where he's able to not necessarily feed Alutemu a clean card draw, maybe he can try and abuse that. But Alutemu with the keep of Shield Shatter as early as now is paying heed to the potential of stealth minions.
Yeah, I don't think we're messing around with any kind of trading nonsense. The SI7 Extortion is generally best used just on the opponent's face in this matchup. There's so few minions in the deck that you're just going to be sending that to the dome as soon as you possibly can. And even with that factored in, it's just all around not a bad hand from a Lambi series. He's got the curve, he's got the Extortion, Assassin you can just play around turn 4 or 5 hopefully as well. And then the passage really nicely rounds this one out for turn 4.
Very nice. And that stealth also means that an early Outrider's Axe does not necessarily get value on the Skulker unless Lambi wants to unstealth it. Alutemu, though, with no early Corsair cash, does not have the limitless resources you want to see as Control Warrior in the early game, but he does have a good variety of removal options. Single target from the 2 Shield Slams and the Onyxian Drake, and then Brawl and Shield Shatter for mass removal. However, a lot of these removal cards are dependent on him having armor, and there's no Heavy Plate or Frozen Buckler in hand just yet. So if Lambi turns up the pressure soon, Alutemu could be in a bit of a pickle.
That's true. I think he'll be quite happily using these Shield Slams as just 1 mana deal 2 damage alongside the hero power for the moment, because obviously, yes, there are bigger minions that you'd like to hit in the mid game, like the Informant and Scabs itself, but generally those have to be dealt with in the form of Brawl or Blade Storm in order to clear those off, because they have stealth once they come down later on. And so just keeping this board cleaned up as it comes along, I do think is the way to go for Alutemu. As Lambi himself is going for the play, I also like of just stabbing himself in the face because it gets the quest done quicker, which is all he wants to do.
And it really worries me if you like stabbing yourself in the face, Derek, but I understand. I understand. No minefield for Alutemu here and no Outriders axe. Of course, Lambi did not give it to him from the Spy-O-Matic, which would have been the most convenient ways of dealing with the board. But we could see exactly what you said a while ago, just Hero Power and Shield Slam to take care of a Spy-O-Matic. If he has any armor remaining on the next couple turns, then he can get some value off of the Onyxian Drakes. But Lambi gave him the Drake because he knew he would be shaving off the armor in the near future. Secret Passage has a lot of breakpoint. Wow, okay, just Assassin.
Yeah, I kind of like this for the moment because we always talk about how 3 mana is the most common breakpoint, which is absolutely true on SI cards. But if you just play a 4/4 here, that's bigger than anything you're going to be able to play on 3 mana anyway for the moment. And if you go Passage next turn, you can also hit Informant, which is already at the point where I would say it's difficult for Warrior to deal with while their armor is low. So I do like this play of Lambi series of just holding out on the Passage as long as possible.
True. The Informant from this point would already be up to 7/7, and we shall see if the lack of value from the actual battle cry of the assassin comes back to bite Lambi. Obviously, it's really tough to say that you should hold the assassin until you see an Onyxian Drake because Alutemu might not necessarily play a minion and then you don't actually get value from the assassin even if it's cheaper later on. So it's just guaranteed fastest quest progression for Lambi here. Onyxian Drake here, again, too expensive to be used with Heavy Plate, so it could just be Heavy Plate Shield Slam for Alutemu, or if he wants, he can go Heavy Plate Coin Shield Shatter to deal with the entire board, but I feel like that's a bit too expensive. The hand really looks like it wants to coin Rakara on turn 6.
That's true. Yeah, that's actually a fair point. I was going to say I really liked the Coin Hero Power Shield Shatter just because it clears off the board and it keeps your armor as intact as possible when you still have 3 extra cards in double Onyxian Drake and the Shield Slam that benefit from having a lot of armor, which would be very nice against an SI7 Informant. As we see here, Lambi series rewarded for holding off on the Passage for a turn. Whereas now it's a little bit less clean, right, in terms of how he can deal with this. Like, he can't fit in Hero Power plus the Drake unless he wants to coin now instead, which admittedly is probably worth it at this point.
Right. I mean, the breakpoint is kind of awkward that you need to Hero Power and need to use the coin, but it still works out fine because the next turn can also just be this, again, Hero Power and the Onyxian Drake, and you definitely feel more confident that your armor will be intact because of this taunt minion still being in the way. So even though Rakara is delayed, Alutemu is in a great spot here. Lambi with the second Passage, looking to complete quest ideally, but these are just a little bit too expensive to get more than 1 card on board.
Yeah, but I think this will complete quest nonetheless now. But like you say, it's still awkward that he can only play one of them and then I suppose trade away the Rustrot Viper. Unless he really wants to get the dagger through.
Just to kill the Drake, I feel like it's worth it, honestly.
Okay, I guess having cards in hand is not as necessary now that you've hit Scabs.
Yeah. Just look at it as protecting the SI7 agent.
Worth mentioning as well that it's very, very nicely timed by Lambi series to get the Scabs in hand the turn before Alutemu could play Mutinous, which I believe is a in this deck, even though it is a dragon version with Kazakhstan. So it means there's no chance of it being munched as long as he gets it down next turn. As I think we will probably see what the most common pan out is versus Warrior on 7 mana, which is Scabs, Stealth, Scabs, Noggenfogger to stealth up the Scabs, and then Mole in order to play around the Bladestorm as well.
That's right, and Bladestorm was just drawn right on time by Alutemu to show us the interplay of how the Rogue is meant to play around it. Playing the Mole that Alutemu knows is in hand, of course. That other gizmo generated prior to Scabs is still a mystery to Alutemu, but of course we see it as a Mole. And now, if he wants to get the full board clear, it is available with Hero Power, Shield Shatter, Bladestorm. It's expensive, but is it worth it?
I want to say no. It's not worth it. Like, how do we feel about just swing face Rakara? Oh, he's going for it here. I know that it's 18 damage he could potentially tank, but there is still quite a lot of threatage left in the deck. Like, there's 2 smugglers. We haven't seen any step effects so far either. Lambi series has drawn out a lot of heavy removal here from Alutemu, and it's still got a fair bit of staying power as long as his deck plays ball.
I was gonna say, I do think it is worth it. Obviously, it feels terrible to use 2 premium removal spells, which on their own should be able to deal with the full board, but in this one instance, have to be used together to get the full clear. Because if there's a Battlegrounds Battlemaster, not only is that so much damage, but it's 2 warrior cards generated for Lambi because of the mole. So leaving that board up in particular, I feel could create even more problems for Alutemu, and he still has at least double Brawl and a Nixian Drake. I think there's enough removal here to work with. Lambi off the Spyomatic. I didn't quite get to see what he picked, did you?
I did not. I think it was cutting class, but I mean, you could make the call on Kazakhstan and say, I just pray they have Mutinous at the bottom of their deck, but that's not anything I think you have a read on in any way.
Yeah, and with this amount of pressure, Alutemu technically, if he got Kazakhstan off the top, could just play it straight away. Like, it's not even Lambi saying that he is giving Alutemu too much pressure in order to play Kazakhstan. The pretty good Brawl board, and he gets the best outcome as well. Yikes.
Absolutely disgusting.
And the Crush even overwrites the Gyro Plate. Kind of awkward here. Loses the 3 damage, but I suppose he gets a higher durability weapon, which could represent 10 damage throughout the course of the game. Smuggler to follow up is one of the best refill options, but this is a second one, and there's still the Shadow Step effects on Tenwu, right, which haven't been seen, and those go down in value once you're out of Smugglers.
That's right, and he's on 7 mana, which, like, you know, this is about what you can expect. 7 mana is not a good breakpoint at this point in Hearthstone's life cycle.
Yeah, Kael'thas, not great here. No expensive spells to even get the value off of it. Never mind having 3 spells in hand. Mr. Smite, again, if Lambi plays this, it makes all of the Shadow Step top decks just complete whiffs from this point out. But if he doesn't play the Smite, he's hardly pushing enough pressure to threaten Alutemu. I think you play it. I don't know. I just want to say believe in your deck. What's the best possible top deck from here on out? It's like Smuggler, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's the axiom we always talk about in Hearthstone, right? Where the point at which they are least likely to have any piece of removal is always now. So it's always just good to, if you want something to stick, go for it now. And even though you know it's almost guaranteed to get removed off, the entire deck is removal, it's not going to stick anytime later, right? And maybe Lambi series has concocted some kind of a series of draws where he's able to stick Mr. Smite or protect it somehow or build up enough combo damage to get there. I just don't see it. Even Mr. Smite plus Tenwu is still only 12 damage, which doesn't even scratch Alutemu.
Yeah. The best time to remove a minion is as soon as it hits the board. The second best time is now. Speaking of removal, Alutemu can go for just Hero Power, Sword and Board, and Nixian Drake. Get rid of the Kael'thas, which is technically, you don't need the damage from the Sword and Board by that point. So you can just not weave in the Hero Power. You can go Sword and Board Kael'thas, and then that puts the damage on it and gains you the armor that you can still end with a Nixian Drake, even with this order of swing first into the 1-3. Yeah, nicely spotted by Alutemu.
Very nicely done. Gets himself almost the full clear, as now we're not quite at the point where Mole has to give an out as his sole win condition, but it's not a million miles off. I guess the one solace for Lambi series is that he has seen double Shield Slam, double a Nixian Drake, Brawl, and 1 Shield Shatter and a Blade Storm. Like, he's seen a lot of the heavy hitters in terms of removal. So if he can stick a SI7 Informant, maybe that can do enough. But with Execute as the card off of Mole, that is not helping him in any shape or form.
He can answer Kazakhstan. Great. Oh, man. I feel like it was desperate enough that that trade had to find him Battle Master even to just get another roll off of the mole. If you can just generate yourself a Rattlegore, that's a win condition versus Warrior. But outside of that, it's not really enough.
Time's ticking.
Looks like he's cashing in the 12 damage. Fair enough, get the mana spent. Mr. Smite with a top deck of Shadow Step is playable twice in a turn for another 12 damage. I think that's where Lambi's head is at, just trying to cheese a victory from this point, and you cannot blame him. The outs are few and far between.
And for Alutemu, it's obviously a very, very easy effort indeed, easy task indeed, to clear off this board with just a minefield. But as to how he should spend the rest of his mana, do you think this ends up being a Rakara game to gain the 10 armor and 10 damage immediately? Or do you think the arguable downgrade in hero power is too much of a expense at this point in the game?
I think it's fine to go for Rakara. He's seen double Wicked Stab, right? And even though he doesn't get the repeated hero power for guaranteed armor, he still has Heavy Plate. He has Bulwark still. So I'd rather that he just even starts swinging at Lambi Series face potentially, because this board can just be cleared with a minefield and then have that Rakara equipped. Alternatively, you could just play the Kazakhstan as an 8/8, which is sort of similar in terms of the damage it's pushing compared to 2 swings of the Rakara weapon. But Alutemu greeting it out a little bit more, trying to get even more card draws, trying to activate the Kazakhstan more so than anything, which involves drawing Old Mutinous.
Keeping carrying on with the card draw here, trying to find himself, like you said, the activation for Kazakhstan. And then, of course, he can start drawing the treasures immediately once he get that as well. Lambi Series still just drawing completely dead at this instance, as we kind of expect him to do, to be honest, with both secret passages having been used, I believe. He is relying on just individual powerful draws, which at this point is exclusively SI7 Informant. I think nothing else even comes close. And now finally with Alutemu, speaking of power draws, finds himself an absolute monster in Alex Straza, or Nixia, sorry, the other one. Is, I think, just homing in very rapidly on the win now.
Yeah, it just sets up lethal on board for the next turn. Alutemu is really just thinking, what warrior card possibly could punish me from this point? And I suppose Rancor is on his mind here, if you provide whelps for Lambi to actually gain armor off of. It's not necessarily a win condition, though. It's just like delaying the inevitable. So I feel like it's still the Onyxia. Is there any other warrior card that Alutemu could be highly concerned about here?
I mean, the Rattlegore, an answer to Onyxia, I guess, would be a big one. He's maybe thinking he just doesn't need that in order to take the win quite yet, or he should just use it as removal on the turn it comes down, because as we said, if his opponent plays a big Informant, like say it's Brawl plus Informant, maybe he then can't find a clean answer, something like that. I don't know. I think all lines are winning here for Alutemu, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right. He knows he's far ahead. It's really just one of those situations where he is avoiding any slim possible chance of disaster here, and he decided that getting the Rakara and the honorable kill from the hero power into Onyxia is the safest possible route. We admittedly can't think of every possible warrior card running through his mind at the moment, but this will surely be enough here. Did Lambi just try to point the smite at Onyxia? That's hilarious.
Yeah, and Nixia is like, no, stop. You gotta respect her personal space in this instance. As Mr. Smite unable to get the job done, and Alutemu equalizing the series at 1 game apiece. As I said, the Warrior was just left with 2 absolutely gorgeous matchups from there, and so I think that was an expected, if a long-winded wave to get there of a victory for Alutemu. Now left with just his Demon Hunter and his Priest against a Rogue and a Priest, which does, I have to say, feel like it still has to favor Lambi Series, because Alutemu time and again has just felt like his Demon Hunter has been in a bit of a weak spot in these series.
That's right, ever so slightly unfavored. And that Onyxia, the Explorer, was just saying, smitey no smiting at the end. Out of my head. In terms of funnest ways to concede, that's got to be up there for Lambi Series. But he knows that he is definitely not out of the series just yet. Like you said, 2 favorables against that Demon Hunter. So I wonder if Alutemu will try and rip that Band-Aid off, cue the Kerchus up right away, or just go for his Priest, another another shot at that. I am honestly hoping that we get to see a Priest mirror because it's only been a couple times throughout the weekend, and we did have a lot of fun testing that matchup in practice. And I don't think it's gotten quite to the levels of extreme craziness that we did in practice, where at one point I was down at 4 health and then made a complete comeback with a miracle turn and had an apotheosis take me back up to full health. That type of thing can happen in that mirror, and I'm so excited to see if that pan out will happen. And, you know, Lambi is no stranger to crazy pan outs.
That's true. I also remember that one win you took before 5 more losses came your way.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was a fun game. But unfortunately, it's not going to be that one here. It's going to be the Priest versus the Rogue on the other side, which I do still think is a very interesting matchup and a real test of skill for both players, especially the Priest, because Rogue represents a very unique problem in terms of the removal it has access to, where it has a couple of small little effects in the early game where, you know, you can't just play a Sethic and think this is definitely going to stick like you can against the likes of Paladin, for example, where they have very, very little removal at all. The SI7 Operative, the Agent, the Extortion as well can clean up some little boards. But then the AoE is essentially just non-existent in this deck now that Scab's Shadowcrafter has left. It's really the strong single target removal that you have to be cognizant of in the late game in the form of either the Fizz Flash or the SI7 Assassin. And I think that leads to some very unique mid games from the Rally Priest that you don't really see represented against any other decks in the metagame.
Interesting opener for Alutamu, isn't it? Like, he could coin Sethic and say, if this sticks, there's Power Word Feast, and he's off to the races. But if there is a single SI7 Extortion, suddenly the rest of the hand is doing very inefficient things. So holding on to the Sethic, I think, is fine. If he wants, he can hold on to it even until next turn, where at that point he could immediately play Power Word Fortitude on it. The Fortitude does have that weird interaction where the cheaper it gets, you don't actually get to corrupt Insight from this point going forward, but I don't think that's Alutamu's main concern. I'd rather him just try and have a minion that's not straight up dead to inform to Extortion or Agent plus Dagger.
Gia, you have to learn how to be a true pro player at Rally Priest. You tell yourself, I didn't want to corrupt the Insight because I might hit Drekthar, and then you just happily carry on playing a rubbish game and drop 200 ranks in an hour. That's how you do it.
200 in an hour, you should see my MMR going down 500 in an hour in BG, Stark.
I mean, yeah, I think you just chill. The power of Sethic plus Power Word Fortitude next turn is just instantly game-winning. Potentially.
Yeah, potentially instantly, maybe 50% of the time, 10% of the time it's game-winning.
Exactly.
It's a huge deal, though. You're very much right. This early in the game, it is just so hard for Lambi to remove huge minions. His SI7 Assassins are not cheap enough. The quest has not been progressed, so there's no chance to have Fizz Flash Distractor in hand already. But he can go for Agent and then Skulker next turn, which will put a Gizmo in hand. But he does say he wants Skulker on board this turn, maybe not trying to give a Holy Smite target. And also, like, if it was Agent into Skulker, he would potentially be floating mana the next turn anyway.
Yeah, does allow himself a decent Shadow Step target with the Skulker on board to replay the SI7 Agent afterwards. However, this minion is far too big for anything in his deck to be able to answer right now, so it's just a matter of cheapening an Assassin by playing as many SI cards as possible, which he's doing, and then trying to find said Assassin, which he can also do with a Swindle off the top.
Or a Fizz Flash, if he's a pro gamer. Nope, wrong spell.
Unlucky. That was also an option, though.
So now it's between just play an Informant or Swindle SI7 Agent. And he goes Informant, which is interesting to me because this breakpoint feels very clean for Sethic to trade into.
Yeah. And so now, as I was saying for Alutemu, that these types of removals that Rogue has access to makes him a little bit unhappy with what is objectively a bananas play Like, going for just double power word feast here, taking out this 5/5, healing back up. So many decks in the game would just fold on the spot and not be able to answer. But what he really wants to do here is diversify his board, get more minions in play, and go wide rather than tall. And that's why I love that he's going for this route of playing an uncorrupted Insight to get himself, hopefully, a Nazmani, but does end up with a Sethic, just for the purpose of, as I said, spreading out his stats.
Hopefully a Drekthar, you mean? You brought it up yourself.
True!
Uncorrupted Insight. That's the whole point. No Fizz Flash again!
He can go... This is a clear, actually, now. Yeah, Gyroblade Hero Power does just about get him there.
If you go Noggin Fog, is there a way to not have to overwrite your Gyroblade? No, it's one off. Dang.
Yeah. You could start Swindle and hope for... Shadow Step doesn't do anything. Yeah. I think if you want to get the clear this turn, it does have to be the Gyroblade Hero Power. But Lambi Series, not interested. I think just trying to chip away at it instead, which is, you know, a valid alternate route to go for. Because currently your opponent is not representing Sethics. Sorry, it's not representing Nazmanis. And so their ability to pop off is not necessarily available quite yet.
Yeah, I think this is one of the spots you can take where if it's a Sethic left up on board specifically and not Nazmani, they technically can't do that much within a turn. They can fill up their hand to infinity basically, but the mana cheat is not there. So Lambi's just saying, okay, there's a world where you generated exactly like double bless or something that punishes me, or fortitude bless. But outside of that, he can take a slow route to just getting scabs online, being able to stealth it, and then get that guaranteed Fizz Flash Distractor, which actually gives him a win condition in the long run, as opposed to frantically trying to remove minions. That also is not necessarily a long-term solution if there's just a rally or a raise dead.
I think Alutemu digging pretty hard here for Devour as the best option to allow him to clear the board and get the Sethic nice and big when used in conjunction with the Condemn. He does miss, though, which is you know, a pretty bad situation to be in. He would much rather have spent that mana on Condemn, but he took a risk, a calculated risk to try and hit the Devour, did miss, and that means now he is, you know, still admittedly very far ahead on the board, but still vulnerable to that single target removal. If Lambi Series can just find himself the assassin, he can turn this game right back around.
Extreme discipline from Alutamu also to take a trade of a 9 attack minion into a 2/4.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I was honestly looking at sending the Sethic face because suddenly you can be threatening like Fortitude plus Bless 2-turn lethal setups, but he doesn't quite have it in hand here, so he just doesn't want to give Lambi any potential to get stealth minions for a sneaky lethal of his own. However, still no assassin available to Lambi. Is this scabs in hand if he just plays the operative?
I think so. I think he's on 5 out of 6. But that also means, conversely, that because he's on 5 out of 6, if I'm not mistaken, Swindle can still actually hit Assassin, which is so tempting, even if it's unlikely to actually work out, because, of course, you're more likely to hit anything else in your deck. But the potential power spike, if you hit it, is enormous.
Yeah, it's huge to get rid of the Sethic this turn, but I do like just the guaranteed scabs because that is for sure clear on the Sethic on the next turn with the Fizz Flash Distractor. This line also lets him fit in the generator on the stealth minion, which is a big deal because he can still play second generator on his scabs and try and set up a lethal. Terrible options for Alutamu. All he wants is a way to answer scabs through stealth, which would involve like finding Shard against all odds, Shadow Word Ruin.
Did he get Drekthar? Oh no!
You can tell from his expression.
Oh. Man, both insights and neither Nazmani has been found is honestly horrible for him here. If he'd had one mana Nazmani, he could have gone Nazmani, coin, gift, silence,
the rest of the hand, so basically.
Actually. Yeah. Well, it's a little awkward because he'd have to silence something on his own side of the board, and Raised Dead isn't actually playable yet. But, you know, no matter what, it was still better than this.
Yes. Completely agreed. I wonder if he just cashes in the silence on the Drekthar while there's just a guaranteed decent target. Turn it into a 4/7, another spell in hand. Because he already knows his Sethic's going back to hand. It's not going in the Raised Dead pool the next turn. And so I kind of like having that one last additional shot at a Shadow Word Ruin to deal with the Stealth Scabs.
Yeah, I think honestly as well, I was considering if you go for Coin Condemn, just because if you know your Sethic's getting bounced back to hand, you're actually overdrawing a card, which is pretty bad in this instance. You really want to see the top card in your deck, given that you just want every single chance you have at finding that Sethic to start popping off.
With the Fizz Flash here and Gyro Blade on the Drekthar, it's a full clear for Lambi series. The question is whether he wants to unstealth anything, which is very scary because suddenly targetable minions means that you let them potentially have a train of targeted spells with Sethic. There's still some things you can never play around, even if you leave everything stealth, like a generated Soul Mirror or a generated Against All Odds, or just Shadow Word Ruin. Okay, he's gonna trade one minion. Surely you stealth the Scabs though, right?
I mean, I'm wondering if you stealth the 4/4, just because I know I keep bringing this up when it's not necessarily a win condition, but leaving an operative on board is a little scary when your opponent has a chance of just copying it straight from your side of the board and going infinite on the old stealth by just attacking it over and over again. But either way, Alutemu gets himself a really gorgeous line here. Raised Dead on only one minion, currently dead in Drekthar. And it turns out that 2-mana Drekthar was trash, but who'd have thought it? They buff it up to 4 mana and it becomes absolutely insane. Now the pop-off is finally here. One Sethic available, which means he can keep chaining these effects. Saving the Focused Will means he gets more activations on this turn. Gets himself Shadow Word Death and Elic Mount. He just needs the discounts to play along with him, and this could be an instantly game-winning turn.
It's not particularly likely that he gets to play both, though, because, like, I think the most likely outcome is one discount goes on each card. That's the other 2-mana spell, and then the Holy Nova and the Initiation. So in the world where he doesn't get to play the full hand, and I don't think he did based on his expression, then you just choose which one between Death and Elic Mount you'd rather have, and he chose Elic Mount because he saw the Fizz Flash Distractor already. Although I will say, I have to eat my words on the Focused Will, like Alutemu absolutely saw this line. He wanted his Drekthar to die, and he needed that Focused Will in hand as fuel to pop off as much as he did this turn. It wasn't the full clear, so Lambi has potential to still get this done. It's Assassin that he's looking for. Still doesn't show up. Oh my goodness.
He knows exactly what he's looking for. By attacking the Gyro Blade first, it means that Assassin, Step Assassin is going to be lethal in this instance. I think you just go with the Secret Passage now. You want to leave yourself mana available to go for Tenwu as well, which you also need to bear in mind to leave a little bit of mana spare. And this allows him to play the passage, potentially trade as well. All he needs is the Assassin and a way to bounce it, and he wins the game. That's the Assassin. That's the Tenwu. That's just it. Oh my god.
That passage was so clutch. Yeah, attacks are going face. Lambi got all the actions through. It was such a difficult turn to parse through after that first swindle did not find him the Assassin. It was looking like it would all fall apart in front of his eyes, but the Secret Passage got the job done. And the implications of this are huge, Derek. That Priest doesn't really even have a good matchup left. It's just the Mirror now.
That's right, yeah, it's looking pretty disastrous now for Alutemu, in all honesty, after a gorgeous game from Lambi series. I love how he approached that at all points throughout, because as we said, you know, Alutemu had this lovely start where he made a nice big minion, was able to just VT ad infinitum in order to clear off every non-stealth minion that Lambi series played. But Lambi series didn't let that get to his head. He wasn't all in focused on clearing off this Sethic because he realized, you know, you can make this Sethic up to 9, 12, 15 attack. You know, do what you want. It's not going to win you the game unless you can kill me in one turn. So he didn't clear it off when he had the opportunity to, instead prioritizing stats on board, face damage, and going for a surprise lethal there. And even though Alutemu hit such a nicely spotted pop-off turn by rezzing the Drekthar, getting both the Sethics in, a simple 1 mana difference on the Shadower Death was what sealed his fate and gives Lambi Series the 2-1 advantage.
Yeah, a lot of things had to go right for Lambi there. To be honest, that Shadower Death not being discounted and Alutemu not finding a Nazmani or Drekthar for so long. But when Lambi was handed the tools, he absolutely used them to their best capability and was rewarded for it. But that is not the end yet. Alutemu still has a glimmer of hope here. One unfavorable and one mirror obviously doesn't look too good for him, but it is not impossible. Demon Hunter can get there with early creative lines like we saw from Lambi Series, just the early Fellfire Deadeye, getting that board presence, and then well-timed glides to disrupt the setup turns from the opponent. It's still possible.
It's still possible, absolutely, yeah. I think he's got himself 2 winnable matchups, but 2 tough ones for sure. I mean, we've already seen the Demon Hunter beat the Priest once today. But weirdly enough, the type of start that Alutemu had there against the Rogue, even though I said it's strong in the early game, that type of start really falls off in the mid game against Rogue. It doesn't really fall off against Demon Hunter. As long as they don't hit a big Magtheridon clear to deal with like a 15 health Sethic, they just don't have an answer. It's so rare that they will be able to answer. It has to be like a perfect double Arcanist plus a Fel Barrage plus something else to actually be able to properly clear it off in instances like that. And so if Lambi Series can hit anything like what we saw from Alutemu there, I think this should be a nice clean victory for him. However, you know, we saw Lambi Series get some good glides against the Priest for Alutemu, but this is Alutemu we're talking about. The glide master himself. He's never had a bad glide in his entire gosh dang life, and he's not going to start now, Gia.
That's right. He hasn't had a bad glide in his life. I completely cannot remember any instances of it whatsoever. All right. Always cracks me up how whenever there's the Anduin graphic, the hand is exactly right behind the head of the player who's... I'm gonna miss that, Derek.
Like he's cradling his baby. You want to support its head.
Burp the Lambi. Okay, that's a Deadeye available to Alutemu on turn 2. I think I'd be super tempted to keep it, honestly.
I want a complete quest and I want to find Glide. Like, it was a nice play from Lambi Series, but your opponent can still coin out Sethic, right? Which is what you're really afraid of. Yeah. And so finding, you know, Fury hero power, finding Fel Barrage, in addition to the obvious cards like Spectral Sight, Double Jump, Glide, I think is just more valuable for Alutemu.
Right. Completely forgot that the interplay is different this time. Alutemu's on play and Lambi was on coin when he went for the Deadeye play last time. And that means that if you're trying to play around Sethic, the Deadeye doesn't actually help that much because you can still have your opponent play the Sethic first when they're on coin. So it is just the mull for Alutemu. Ends up with a middling hand, the Viper the only type of card draw at the moment, but Lambi doesn't have any minions, so this can be the saving grace for Alutemu at the moment. No aid station taken, sorry Raven.
I'm telling you, man, that card's just good in this deck. Every time I get it, I'm happy to see it. As long as I get exactly 1, not like 4 in a single game, like Gabby found in the finals. But I mean, here for Lambi Series, this is the kind of hand that, again, is teetering on the brink of winning the game. Double Power Word Fortitude plus a Feast as well to go alongside it. A Sethic, a Nazmani, a Drekthar, any minion that he can get his hand on here, I think is theoretically game-winning, which is why we can see him just doubling down on exactly that fact. Shard of the Naru, completely useless for its actual effect in this matchup, but for tradable, that's all it needs to do. Just needs to find 1 single minion.
Yeah, that Thrive, honestly, not great for Lambi. He was hoping to find any tutor effect, Horn, or Insight. Ideal. Palm Reading, you wouldn't really be upset about either. The Shard, it's some form of cycle. He's just praying. And honestly, if he trades it and doesn't find a minion or tutor effect, we could already see him potentially dig for alternate minions with Draconic Studies. Like, this is the type of hand that can pop off even with a Crimson Hothead or a Circus Amalgam. That honestly, might be where he's at.
Ooh, that's a spicy top deck. You know, now we can find that Horn of Rathion, the Insight as well. Even just going for Draconic Studies next turn. Like you said, if you go 0 mana Draconic Studies, you can then just easily fit in a Hothead, the one that summons Whelps on 5 mana now as well. There's just like a few cards that you can hit that just have stats, which is the important thing. That gets you a minion too. This might be good enough.
Yeah, and it's cheap. And whereas the Auspicious Bears was not. But Lambie, of course, he's in the position praying that the glide does not get the glide. This is the scariest possible position. Studies! But there's a Spectral Sight. That's decent.
He's lost his powers, Gia, just when it mattered most. Lambie series. No glide, no glide, no glide. Oh.
Okay, that's quest progression, though. Double tradable available. Lambie's not out of the woods just yet, right? He can still get glided on a hand like this if he doesn't find a cheap enough minion to dump these spells on.
He can, and Alutemu has found himself a lovely little hand here with Kurtrus to clear off whatever comes down next turn. A potential Magtheridon very soon as well, even though it needs a little bit extra to make it truly pop off in one single turn.
There's a lot of potential in this hand, but an awkward little conundrum for this turn where you kind of want to keep buffing the Kurtrus by attacking, but it's a waste of your weapon somewhat. And the charges on this are valuable to have more attack to deal with bigger minions. But Alutemu in the end says you would rather get the buffs towards Kurtrus. And that is a minion for Lambie! That's just a gigantic Sethic!
It's so big! Oh my god!
Plus 10 health, plus 6 attack minimum.
You can even just shoot it with the Holy Smite for another spell. It's going to heal back up thanks to the Feast as well. This is unkillable.
Yeah, I don't think the bats are big enough for this, are they?
14. I mean, you can attack in. You can't fit in a hero power. They'd have to be up to 6. And yeah, I mean, it's only turn 5. They're literally not that big. Or more, sorry, they have to be 7 actually as it heals. My bad. Ooh, that's a big top deck though. That allows for 8 damage plus 5. It's 13, which is not there, obviously, quite yet, but it makes a big difference in terms of his ability to answer this next turn.
But if you are just answering it next turn, you just say, Magtheridon here, pray you're not dead, go for the big clear next turn and stick a 12-12. I'm much more willing to do this compared to the last spot that we saw the Magtheridon pre-set up because it's a Sethic on board, not Nazmani's. So again, the potential to do many, many things in one turn is lower when you don't have the mana cheat. Like, yes, there's the potential to generate spells, but none of those spells are like Shadow Step for Rogue that instantly shut off Magtheridon. It has to be quite a lot of health put on the Acolytes to actually stop the Magtheridon setup. It's close though, because we could see Alutemu go for the safer line. There's honestly also a line where you just play Kurtrus, but because he doesn't have the mana to guaranteed wake up Magtheridon on the next turn altogether at the same time, I think it is just the setup play. He can kill one of the tokens now if he wants to.
He's risking it, and Lambie series, I don't think is going to be finding lethal this turn, even if he can get his hands on a Bless, but he can get a lot of damage through.
I don't think there's any dragons that really help this situation because, like you said, it's all about trying to maximize damage since he knows almost for certain that the Magtheridon is going to clear his board the next turn. Thalnos?
Yeah, I mean, Thalnos is one of those cards that you can never play because you don't want to overwrite the Sethic spot on Rally, but you know, just to draw a card here, it's fine.
Oh, that's true. I forgot that it dilutes the Rally pool.
Okay,
So
sure, just taking heat. Yeah.
Light Shower instead, and that's not being played this turn. I mean, you can try and say, oh, maybe they need the attack swing and the taunt will stop the wake up on the Magtheridon, but that's a bit optimistic. I feel like I'd rather see him play Palm Reading.
Ooh, Ysera is interesting to get yourself a Dream in the hand to send Magtheridon back. Wow, he actually is playing the Light Shower just to try and protect these Acolytes. I guess getting a minion in the way does, of course, stop the power of Talented Arcanist plus Bell Scream Blast, which is one of the more common ways to clear it off. But obviously here, Alutemu still has the answer. Such an important turn here that Lambi Series wasn't able to get in an Elec Mount, a Gift of Luminance, any way to protect these Acolytes.
Yeah, absolutely huge. And fair enough, he did remove several outs for Alutamu to actually wake this up by playing the minion. Again, the taunt in the way means that the swing can't naturally go through to the 1-3s, and the disruptive minion plays around the Fell Scream Blast out, but against the Immolation Aura, there is no stopping the Maggie T from waking up, and Alutemu has finally put together a relevant counter push. None of the generated spells so far for Lambi are able to deal with the Magtheridon, but because of the 3 damage preloaded on it, if Lambi can stall until Runaway Blackwing, that is 9 damage.
True. Yeah, that's a pretty big deal to be able to cleanly clear that off. Obviously, you'd rather find something more immediately off the palm, or the second one as well, theoretically.
All right, which one of these has the Shadow or Death in them? Not this one. Soul Mirror next turn is interesting.
Raised Dead is a lot worse now, obviously.
Right. I was thinking if you take Bless and you rally, you could Bless a Sethic, but it's not that threatening, honestly, this turn.
Oh!
Oh my god! That one had the death in it. It was the
second one.
Yeah. But Alutemu, wow, not even a Grimace there. Fully focused here. And that glide is quite disruptive, to be honest, but it's just such a clean Kurtrus setup, right?
I wonder how much of a read Alutemu has on no Nazmani at this point, because quite clearly, Lambi Series was without minions for the first few turns, right? I think you can make that read reasonably well. If Sethic was in hand at the start, it would have come down earlier with those... with those Power Word Fortitudes a little bit earlier before the palm reading turn happened earlier on. But here for Alutemu, if you can make that read that there are no other Nazmanis or way to draw them in hand, maybe you don't want to glide your opponent, you just want to leave them with a cheap but bad hand.
It's really hard to make the read here, and honestly, this turn from Alutemu was super interesting too. He deliberately attacked after the Kurtrus hero, which means that he wanted 1 extra damage from his hero power, and perhaps also didn't want the attack on his minions to play around Shadow Word Ruin. He just kind of has the read that this spot, it's not so important to have attack on his minions because he doesn't feel he'll have to take trades in the next couple turns, or he feels that the board's getting traded anyway. Remains to be seen whether he'll be rewarded for that, but here the rally for Lambi with that Nazmani top deck. He has the potential for a mini pop-off here.
Yeah, very mini one. That's a very nice top deck indeed, though, to be able to protect the Sethic, I want to say. But okay, he disagrees, would rather keep the Nazmani nice and cheap. Sorry. Wow, okay.
Your prayers, great too. Just keep the discounts going. Pretty huge. If he was gonna silence at some point, I want to say you start with that before the Devour, because then it'll go back to 4. But
sure, yeah.
But it's a very minor deal.
Okay, a nice removal-based top deck there in the Arcanist to be able to clear off a lot of this. Star Student Stelina, though, if we want to talk about disruption, low-key is just better than Glide here. You know they've got a dragon in hand, and you can guarantee send that bad boy back to the deck.
Right. So what's the cleanest way to get the full clear here? Obviously, Fury hero power plus the trade is enough to deal with the 2-9, and then Fel Barrage deals with the rest. It's a bit weird that the Fury had to be used as opposed to just refreshing your hero power afterward because of the breakpoint on the health of this. Actually just going to Glide at the end of it, and he had to play it in Outcast if he was going to play the Fury for the full clear and get all of that mana still available to play Glide. So it's a bit awkward for Alutemu here, but he prioritizes getting his own quest done, even if it means giving Lambi an additional card. Oh, wow. That's a top deck.
You're just throwing that down, right? You could mess around with trying to find Nazmani, trying to find Sethek, or you could just play a 9-9.
Yeah, clears the board. He's seen the bats, but now we are thoroughly in the territory of performers being Alutamu's main win condition, I think.
Right.
That's a clear as well. I think it's fine to tank 9 in this situation.
Agreed, yeah.
And he can glide again.
With the trade, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, whether or not he wants to outcast the glide is, I want to say, you don't really have a good read on whether it'll be good or not. Like the hand
It's
is
literally
just...
exactly the same, right? It's
Yeah.
There's no difference. Like, you could argue that they've corrupted an insight potentially, but I don't know.
Yeah. But if he's spectral sighting, it might be quest completion without glide. Honestly, really close.
Yeah, it is. Okay, non-outcast glide.
He's torn. He could definitely just play both the need for greed and spectral sight and say that's enough resources as I'm ever gonna need.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I guess saving the glide and keeping it in outcast position does potentially allow him for a shuffle back into the deck if Lambi series does hit the pop-off on this turn.
Yeah. True. That's Kurtrus in hand, and that's Jace as well. That is a very juiced Jace. We're looking at double Fel Barrage, 1 Fury, I think.
All right, we need a big hit here.
Is that a Drekthar?
That's a Drekthar! Oh.
We should compile all the facial expressions of everybody who played Corrupt Insight into Drekthar. It's just so easy to read at this point.
Yeah, it's like that photography project that someone did. It's like I took a picture of someone before and after I told them they're beautiful. It's like I took a picture of Hearthstone players before and after they drew Drekthar off Corrupted Insight, and you would all look the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is definitely not a beautiful sight. No yellow border, just a 4/4. What are you gonna do? Could turn it to a 6/6, I guess.
Oh, that's not winning you a game of Hearthstone, is it?
Definitely not.
My quest, my revenge.
Yep, there's the Kurt. And double jump to get the spectral sight. I was honestly looking at just Eldraki, and then you can double hero power this turn. Oh, Stelina! Huge. Mirror? Back in?
Yeah.
Answer to the Kurtrus, yeah.
Right. I was toying with the idea of gift just because that's their biggest pop-off mechanism. Like, if they just hit rally alone, that's not going to be enough. But I think you're absolutely on the money. Like, just having a board this big is game-winning on its own. Priest can't answer this.
Ay. Only 1 minion, and it's not Sethek. It's just slipping away from Lambi.
Yep. He just got glidden, right? He hit that state where he was unable to generate enough stuff, and if he had generated enough stuff, it would have all been glided back into the deck anyway. His early push with that giant Sethek was answered, and you know, I say it's a good matchup for the Priest, but it's a very brittle matchup for the Priest. If your first push doesn't get the job done, your entire deck can just fall apart.
True. I don't think the Jace represents lethal yet, so I do favor not playing it here because it could just blow up Alutamu's own board at this point. Just cycle through to the end of the deck, weave in those hero powers, and get the lethal next turn with the Jace. Glide didn't happen on turn 4, but Glide Man strikes later on in the game. Does Lambi still have an out if it's exactly Sethek off the top? Does he have enough mana to get this done? It would have to be literally the best ever generations in Hearthstone, but technically he can get 2 Nazmanis and a Sethek online if the Sethek is the top deck.
That's right. You need one of those chains where you go like Sethek, renew, get a renew, it gets discounted, renew, get a renew, it gets discounted, fortitude, death, you know, like the most perfect series of cards one after the other. This quite clearly is not it, and it is going to equal game 5 in the first semi-final of the day.
No way! The Demon Hunters are just beating the Priests left and right here. It's just coming down to something that we never could have expected, and we wouldn't have it any other way, right? Every single series at this point, when it's the World Championship ticket on the line, we do kind of expect it to get down to Game 5. And what is it going to be? None other than the Priest Mirror!
Oh, how could it come down to Rally Priest Mirror in 2022? It's... man, it really does feel like the last 2 years are just an absolute blur. Like, we could be at any point along the timeline here. It could be way back in 2020 with Xananan and his feature, just streaming game after game of this Priest. Letta in Grandmasters, playing game after game of this deck. And here, finally, at the end of it all, on the last day of the season for Grandmasters, Rally Priest still making a comeback and still just delivering pure, raw, unfiltered entertainment, as it is just undeniably one of my favorite decks of the last few years.
And just watching the player cams, all of our highlights are basically images you can hear. I've watched enough Alutamu streams to know that when he leans back and cries out that there's no glide, exactly what it sounds like without the audio. But the pain for Lampy series was palpable as well when he hit that Drekthar off of inside and when the glide didn't really cooperate with him at the end. But now it all comes down to this, the Rally Priest Mirror. I do hope we get one of those panouts that is back and forth, Dark. I want minions on both sides. I want Drekthar on both sides. Let's be fair.
Yeah, exactly. I hope for no accidents, no disasters that can happen through no fault of your own with this deck. Like I say, it's a cruel mistress indeed. Some of the times it just doesn't give you any minions, doesn't give you any spells, you get the wrong half of the deck, everything can all fall apart. But as I've said a couple of times, there are multiple ways that it can be nice to you as well. We've seen a couple times already today the pan out of Priest just going Sethic, buff, buff, hoping that that's enough to get the job done. In this matchup, it very possibly will be. That's a very realistic win condition that very often players will mulligan for here. But there is the alternate approach that I like to see very often from our players as well, which is the miracle version, right? Which I find generally, if you hit a good enough of a miracle turn, which isn't that much to ask for with this deck, you beat just the minions plus buff route as well, especially if you're Lambi series, who is running double Shard of the Naru, which could be a big talking point in this matchup.
Wait, I thought Lambi cut a Shard. Oh, wait. No. He's the one who was running to. You're right. It is the Powered Feast that he's cut, and then Alutamu has the double Feast 1 Shard. So it's weird because both those cards are very good to have in the matchup. Obviously, one is payoff if you're ahead, and the other one is a comeback mechanism if you're behind. So it definitely depends on your situation as to which card you would rather have. Although Alutamu is the player on coin, and a Sethic is available, and there's no Holy Smite for Lambi. This could already be a disaster. No Power Word Feast, though, for Alutamu to immediately buff the Sethic, and that's the big deal. Maybe Lambi can still have the breathing room to come back.
Yep, no feast, no blessed. And Alutemu was kind of playing to this eventuality about keeping Thrive in the shadows. Generally, that's a way to just try and tutor palm readings from your deck, is most often why you'd be keeping that card in your starting hand, which does lower the chance that you can hit the kind of hand that you were talking about. Coin Sethic into Bless / Power Word Feast as the real dream start to the game. But he could very well still just end up seeing himself go for Sethic on 2, Gift of Luminance on 3, and then go for Thrive on turn 4 to try and find some extra buff effects, like that Power Word Fortitude being the really big one.
So interesting whether or not you're supposed to still coin out this Sethic, even if you don't have the guaranteed buff the next turn, though, just to say that in case my opponent plays Sethic, I have the top deck of a buff or Holy Smite to deal with it. And in the context of Alutamu's hand, I was kind of okay with coining Sethic, because in the case where Lambi does nothing, he just goes Thrive. And in the case where Lambi has Holy Smite to deal with it, he still has Raise Dead to bring it back. But Alutamu taking a more measured approach, and for now, rewarded for it, because he gets to hold on to coin, and Lambi didn't have the counter Sethic on turn 2. He does, however, have a Nazmani play, which I would be way too chicken to go for. I think it gets value traded every single time by a buff spell. So the palm reading is where my head would be at for Lambi.
I agree. I think if your opponent tempos Sethic here, you don't pack up the game if they have Power Word Fortitude for that exact 3 attack necessary. But my goodness, is it devastating should they find it. And Lambi series here is taking the risk, which gives Alutemu a few shots at finding the Fortitude. Renew obviously adds 2 cards back to his hand, which will further cheapen the Fortitude, which I'm then pretty sure allows him to go Thrive into Fortitude for 0 mana if he's able to get that off the Thrive.
Bless is also an out here from Thrive. Of course, it hurts to coin it out, but you'd take it if it's a guaranteed clear
fair.
on the Nazmani. Powered Feast a little bit short of dealing with it, but we see Alutamu just hovering the Gift of Luminance as the more safe approach, I want to say.
Right.
Because you do get the guaranteed Divine Shields and Generations in hand, and in the case where you miss with Thrive on any of the good buff spells, then you'd be pretty happy you did that. But it's so difficult to figure out whether it's worth taking the risk. Honestly, I'd be scared of the Nazmani. I'd want to take the risk here.
I think I would too, but it's so hard to call. He takes the risk looking for the Fortitude, misses, but finds Holy Smite, which is enough to answer. It's not the absolute dream, but it's enough to get the job done for the moment. And he could even coin out the Renew if he wants to bolster this Sethic again. Keep it out of range of Shadower Devour, which is something you always have to consider in this matchup. But it looks like he's still leaving the options open for this slightly more miracle approach. Saving the coin for when he gets the Nazmani later on means he has higher pop-off potential, even if it comes at the sacrifice of some early board control.
Well, for Lambi, the insight pickup is super interesting. He could corrupt it many different ways this turn. But again, that was a double Nazmani opener. So now he has a 1 in 3 that the insight hits. Old Rek'Thar, which is not what you want to see.
Okay.
Okay. So he does have pop-off potential, mini pop-off on the next turn, but it's okay if it's just mini because he has the crucial rally, which after this board dies, will bring back the dynamic duo of Sethic and Nazmani, and then he can continue the train. Question is whether he wants to commit a Sethic this turn. I don't feel like it's necessary, but wow, he disagrees. I just feel like it's giving Alutamu more targets.
It is, yeah, but it does immediately set up for the rally next turn, which wouldn't be available if he went for the Sethic next turn. And I think because of that, this rally is just on the brink of being powerhouse rally. Like, it's not going to pop off in the miraculous ways we know it can next turn, but just by getting the Sethic played, it gives him that possibility at several further points in the game. Whereas Alutemu here on the other side is just absolutely keeping an iron grip on board control this game. The only problem is he's generating a whole bunch of resources, but has no way to cheat them out with still no Nazmani Bloodweavers. His control of the board, I think, is going to start getting outclassed very soon from Lambi series mana cheat plays that are coming online now.
I agree. Even though Alutamu has had all of the value generation in the early game, it just doesn't keep up with Infinite, which is the potential that Lambi will have in the near future if this first board is not immediately answered. Because I think the train ends here. Yeah, no more 1-cost spells or 0 cost for Lambi. However, if Alutamu does answer this, there's no big second rally or raise dead available to Lambi. So is there an answer? Not to everything. Renew can go digging, or... And it's a weird shape of board. Like, 1 Shadow Word Death would be nice for the Sethic. If he insights, there's a good shot at Rek'Thar, and if not that, you still get a Nazmani for sure.
I mean, he's considering so many things because obviously he would kind of like to corrupt it first, by which you could go for the Gift of Luminance, but then that makes it so you have a 1-mana Nazmani left over, which you'd have to coin out, and then you're not getting the discount. If he does hit Nazmani, say, what does he actually do is the follow-up question. Are you going coin, gift, renew? That's a lot of your mana already expended, and most of your turn timer already expended as well. Alutemu has got to get moving if he hopes to pop off on this turn with the rope already halfway burnt and Nazmani only just now coming down.
Okay, I think the overall spirit of the turn was completed. I hope we fix a spectator because Alutamu here was just making the macro decision of not popping off this turn. It's just making sure you get a Nazmani, you play the Nazmani, have it in the pool for the rally the next turn. So he's accepting that Lambi can pop off, but he's hoping he can pop off in a big enough way to answer it the next turn. But unfortunately, we can't see anything.
Come on!
Lambi has a big turn ahead of him. This is a double Nazmani Sethic turn. Please let us see what's happening. Spectator, come back.
Yeah, once again, spectator broken. Okay, here we go. We're caught back up with Lambi series halfway through his pop-off turn, and my goodness, this looks powerful. Palm reading still ready to go. Horn to refill his hand with more minions as well. He's missing a couple of those key buff spells, which would really make this pop off, but it's still just a monumentally powerful play and putting him so far ahead on board.
Yeah, the palm reading has to discover a pointy spell, like you often call it. Devour, okay.
That's pointy.
Yeah, that can keep the train going because the Sethic for sure gets the discount after the palm reading resolves. So if you want, you can keep going, but it looks like Lambi is chilling from here, which means Alutamu has to do the same thing. Rally, coin, gift is possible, but it's not that much, honestly.
It's a setup turn here. It has to be a setup turn, right? You've just found palm reading. This hand with a 1-mana discount on everything is very powerful. You just have to not die, which is, you know, obviously not a foregone conclusion against Rally Priest. But his pop-off next turn, if he can find himself Shard or some kind of Shadowed Ruin play, or even like Soul Mirror, if he gets a whole bunch of discounts from Nazmani's, is approaching possibility. You know, this is still salvageable. He just needs to hit that big pop-off turn, which I think comes from palm reading this turn, and then the second your turn starts, the millisecond, you start popping off. And there, with the Shard, buys him that extra time to make it so that he is almost definitely not dead heading into next turn.
That's so huge. That means he gets the full setup and the safety that Lambi cannot, in most circumstances, instantly kill him. Goes for the Sethic this turn, which is fine. There's one in the Raised Dead pool already. Whether or not it dies, he can rally the other one back and get the Gift of Luminance. Lambi, only one Sethic. He copies that over... yeah, of course, you copy the Silence Minion and it doesn't do anything. Not gonna get discounts here, but he's trying to build a resilient enough board.
Okay. That renew is big. The amulet obviously doing absolutely nothing, but for the moment we are looking for Gift of Luminance, fine. We are looking for Powered Fortitude. Wave of Apathy can buy you time, but honestly, Lambi series is not really doing all that much with extra time right now. His hand is pretty impotent.
He needs another rally to bring back unsilenced Nazmani to truly pop off here. Oppies?
Wow.
Nazmani. Oh, because of hand space issues, I suppose?
Right, yeah.
Sure.
And just
But the thing is,
pass?
he has a shard of his own, and Alutamu, no matter how miraculous his turn is, cannot generate lethal without having minions already on board, right? There's just no charge minions. So Lambi is just trying to set up for the best possible answer, and then we can go again. This is exactly what we asked for, Derek. It is a back and forth Rally Priest mirror. It is impossible to tell who's going to come out in the lead here, but I see Elec Mount and Draconic Studies generated for Alutamu, which is tons of value.
It's just the golden ratio as well that I keep talking about, right? 3 Nazmanis, 2 Sethics just gives you that perfect pop-off potential. You're generating enough stuff, and you're also discounting the stuff you generate very nicely as well. Fortitude, Bless, Feast, Apotheosis, another silence effect as well there with the Shard of the Naru. This is all going so perfectly for Alutemu. He's just got to keep going, get these cards all played.
Oh, Alutamu going as fast as we've ever seen him go. Usually a carefully calculated player, sometimes falls victim to the rope, but when it comes to decks like this, he absolutely knows that it has to be done snappy. Is he going to commit the Shard is my question here. He has 2 of them, probably fine. Just get rid of the Sethic effects. Oh, he hit Condemn as well? Are you kidding? Actually, it's not that good if you Shard.
Think that kills anything? Yeah, because everything goes up to 3 or 5 health. But I mean, it's still just another card to keep on discounting. Against all odds, is not going to be good in this instance, but could get him maybe a little bit of board kill later on if it's needed. But the headline here is Alutemu got himself off a successful pop-off turn, and honestly, a pretty juiced up hand for next turn, even if this board is somehow dealt with. Look at all of these buff spells he's hitting. My God.
Look at all of these buff spells. Not chickens. But that's a 0 cost, Ysera. That's insane. He has Shadowed Ruin. He has a hand that keeps going and answers stuff. But if Lambi can deal with this board, which he has the silence effect for at least the text on the minions, and he can trade off a fair amount of it because of all of the minions he has left. Alutamu doesn't have a regeneration for the pop-off minions, right? No rally, no raise dead. And that could be the difference maker.
Lambi Series did opt here to not trade off any of his board beforehand, which means he doesn't have board space to play both a Sethek and a Nazmani, but I think that's okay because he's probably not going to be playing either on this turn. He's going to try and set up for a more powerful play next turn. Gets himself the Ram, which, hey, it's a rush here. That's not terrible.
Yeah, it's a full clear because of that. Pretty nice. Now Alutamu can definitely get through this. He has Condemn. Oh, misses the raise dead though. That's a big deal. But at the very least, this could just be Ysera. Ysera awakens if he can create the hand space for it, which is actually pretty tough to do. How does he do that?
Yeah, it is. Odds is not doing anything, but honestly, he could just play against all odds just to make up some hand space. Double Condemn does just offer him a clean full board clear here, which is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. And that kind of sets us back to square one, honestly. Fully clear board for both players.
Well, he does have a 0-mana Ysera as well, which we also have to bear in mind.
Okay, sorry. On the board state, I mean, obviously the quality of hands is very different for both players. But honestly, like, it's not even necessarily Alutamu that has more value available to him. He has a Ysera, yes, but he doesn't have a Sethek, and Lambi does.
That's true, but Alutamu, as soon as he finds one, I think is making his very, very powerful, right? Because he has a cheap psych split. He can get a lot of extra generation going. Wow. Just trying to make hand space here.
Oh man, he's stressed out.
Oh, is he trying to think what order they come in? I mean, it just goes from cheap to expensive, right? But is he not going to play the Ysera here? Wow.
Wow, indeed. I thought it was pretty valuable just for the board presence, even if it meant tossing an against all odds. But looks like Alutamu is posturing himself for having the maximum value on his spells, trying to answer as many things as possible. But how do you answer infinity, Derek?
I mean, you say that, but there's not that much discount. If these discounts don't play along and give him discounts on the targeting spells, which they are currently, this isn't necessarily going all the way. And Insight and Horn, double tutor effects. I think he's got, like, what, Drekthar left in the deck? There's not that much of value.
Take a look. Yeah, all the non-Drekthar minions are gone, so the Insight is just pulling Drekthar here. So now we have to look at how many regeneration effects are available to both players. Lambi still has a rally and a raise dead, and he has generated a rally, which is huge. If we are just going to go back and forth on how many Setheks each player can summon in total in the game, Lambi's currently in the lead, especially since Alutamu burnt a raise dead and only has one rally left in deck.
He's coming up with a very creative way, though, here to get through the to get himself another Sethek, even if he doesn't have that many left in the deck. Copying his opponent's one, buffing up the Nazmani, getting himself another targeting spell here. And if he needed any more, hey, there's the Alex Straza ready to go. Oh, sorry, the Ysera ready to go with Dream to further give him more refill abilities. Another power infusion as well. This is such a big board that Alutamu is gaining himself.
Huge. Question is whether he wants to commit the silence to finish off the Nazmani. Like, mass silence is such a huge deal, but he has two of them. And now an extra rally? Just play that, right? And then the zero-cost shard?
You're saving that, though, right? I think you got to save it for a bigger pop-off in Eternal, too.
True. Yeah, he hasn't really drawn the other rally. So I think the important part is to just make sure that at any given point, you will have a refill guaranteed, something in hand, because you respect your opponent enough to deal with this board and then the next board. So just making sure that there's no one window where you don't have the capability of answering them is a big deal here. But here we go. Rally number infinity for Lambi. I have a lost count. Fortitude, double Nazmani, one Sethek. Pretty good ratio.
That's bad too. The chain ends here. He has to trade away his shard to try and find another targeting spell.
Yeah, nothing pointy. That's pointy.
That is very pointy indeed. That's like the perfect card.
Death is pointy, but only on his own minions?
Yeah.
Hysteria, interesting.
Yeah, the chain running dry now, but he does leave himself with a rather unthreatening minion on the other side of the board, to be fair.
Oh, but his hand just
Tempo
has...
Director. Yeah.
Yeah. It's yellow, but it ain't summoning anything. Yeah, this hand is just not enough value for Lambi. It feels like it's slowly slipping away from him. Meanwhile, Alutamu still has Ysera. And double rally. Except he doesn't have any pointy spells for himself.
Right.
Ysera can provide them.
Exactly, yeah. He could go like Rally, Ysera, Nightmare, and then Ruin in order to kill off 2 of the opposing minions.
But is that an overcommitment, using both your rallies in one go? It's easy to get excited because that's the only way to really trigger the rally is with Ysera spells. But I feel like 1 is fine here.
I mean, honestly, just stats from Ysera, like playing the Laughing Sister, playing the Emerald Drake, these are the game-winning cards, theoretically.
That is very true. It's just going to use Awakens to finish off the board. It's not a rally turn at all, and I think this is super responsible from Alutamu. Still just maintain the pointy spells provided by Ysera in hand. Play the Emerald Drake. You threaten enough stats every turn that you force Lambi to have an answer, and the answer from Rally Priest involves them playing their resources. It involves them finding their Sethic. And if you can answer the answer in the long back and forth trades of value, you might just come out on top. But that's raised dead now for Lambi. I mean, if he's lucky, he can get a Sethic and a Nazmani.
Oh, no!
No value!
Okay, so he can go Wave of Apathy, Hysteria would, I think, allow him with a hero power to clear off everything. Instead, he's just going with it this way, which still, allows him, I think, to get a guaranteed full clear. Or actually, if he double attacked into the Emerald Drake, it wouldn't have been. But most of the time, that was a full clear, and he does hit it.
Right. Doing whatever he can to answer the board, but his generated cards are running short now. Alutamu slightly deeper in fatigue, but I don't think we'll get to that point. I think he has enough to keep the train going for 3-4 more turns, 2 rallies, and an additional race that discovered. I think Lambi is slowly getting pushed out of this one.
He is indeed. Get himself a couple of nice extra generations. Nightmare plus Dream, very nicely done just to deal with a big minion. Getting himself another palm readings as well. Oh, it's all just there, isn't it?
Yeah. It just never ends.
Okay, these are not amazing.
Yeah, 2 dead cards in the idols. Race dead pool slightly diluted by the Ysera minions. Did he just miss 2 more cards? Or is the animation
No, it was a
behind?
raised dead, right? Yeah.
Okay, okay.
It wasn't the targeted effect, so I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, these turns are impossible to pilot perfectly, no matter what we say. Laughing Sister. Just to not overdraw. Oh, sorry, he's only 9 in hand right now. I guess he can hold it. That's the turn. And this is still no Sethic, no raised, no rally for Lambi. What's it gonna be?
Oh man, like low-key Lambi series is the one who needs the against all odds here, because alongside the Wave of Apathy, that gives him the full clear. But now with just a Bless, he can kill off a minion of his choice with Bless plus Shadow Word Ruin, but that ain't winning him the game.
Certainly isn't. That 1 of Rally left in his deck is elusive. And even then, without a copy effect for another Sethic, it just feels like it doesn't generate enough value either. Doing the best he can to get rid of the value generator for Alutamu, but he's got enough value in hand already.
Yeah, I think Alutamu can close this one out now. It's probably not lethal on this turn, but it's also definitely not lethal on the other hand, because with 3 Nazmanis, 2 Sethics, a Fortitude off the top is a fantastic card to hit. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Everything costs nothing, basically.
Will.
Will is pointy, just take it.
Yeah.
Going.
I mean, weirdly enough, these Idlevius charges, I think, are actually still active as well. These are just like 3 mana and 4 mana 10/10s because he still has the Drekthar in his deck.
Oh yeah, you're right. I forgot.
They're actually just kind of nuts.
True.
Oh,
Don't draw
these are so
Drekthar.
good.
I know. It's an embarrassment of riches.
Entire hand just costs absolutely nothing now.
This is one of those situations where we like to say Alutamu wins as long as he doesn't punt, but I honestly don't know what he could do to punt at this point. Like, there's just too much.
Yeah, I can't think of a way for him to lose this one. Like playing into a huge Shadow Word Ruin, if he just makes all his minions have more than 5 attack but doesn't kill his opponent. Maybe he runs out of resources then, because again, Lambi Series does still have access to a rally in the deck, which is the kind of card, obviously, you need to potentially pull things back. But Alutemu isn't going to be doing that.
Yep. Of course, the aid station at the end makes everybody happy. Except Lambi. No rally, but he can thrive again for rally. And then he has no mana, and then you probably just play Shadow Word Ruin, and maybe you're not dead. Still no rally. Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
Can silence in order to deal with the text, but again, that doesn't matter. It's the stats on board that are killing him right now.
Yeah. You can Ruin and then Shard.
Sure.
But I think it is more important to just find his rally. I think this Shard needs to be traded for him to have any real shot at winning the game, which, don't get me wrong, it is currently 0.001% or lower.
Lambi Series just racking his brain for any way that he could possibly claw this one back. This is lose and he is out of contention in his final series of Grandmasters to the World Championship. He is so close. He can taste it. Saying just yesterday on social media, this should be easy for him to make it right. And he was so close, getting 2-1 up in the middle of the series. And now, even with Alutemu having his board silenced, as we said, he has just got 10-10, 10-10, +3, +5. Unlimited value, it feels like at this point, whereas Lambi Series is just clawing for anything to do at this point.
We've been talking about the rally as the out, but honestly, even if he finds it, right, the train ends very quickly.
Yep.
No copy effects. He could play a Nazmani straight up, but it's only that one Bless as a targeted spell, and then he needs to hit the miracle renew into renew into renew, and that just doesn't seem very likely whatsoever. Meanwhile, Alutemu with infinite raised deads just has board after board after board. It never stops from here. We asked for it at the beginning of the series, right? A nice back and forth where both players have access to minions, and it did start out that way. Alutemu a bit flustered by using the insight, which means his idol doesn't get any value anymore, but it's not a big problem whatsoever.
That is definitely a misstep at this point. But like we said, even with little mistakes like that, Alutemu is still just so far in the lead as the nerves, even for Alutemu, I think one of the most stalwart players we've had in Grandmasters, one of the least flappable, is still feeling the pressure here as we see a 0 mana 0/0 instead of a 0 mana 10/10 to finish up the turn. But Lambi Series, with no help whatsoever, can again buy himself a turn, maybe, with the apathy just to tank 5.
Yeah, from his perspective, 6 on board by that point, and Alec Mount is still not lethal. Not guaranteed.
Yep, 6 plus the Mount is 10. No extra from hand effects. He'd be able to survive the turn. And then again, like we said, if he can get the rally, I think there are theoretically combinations of outcomes that could pull him back into the game. But we are talking like, honestly, 1 in tens of thousands at this point to be able to pull it back in one turn.
Astronomically low. I'd put it in the million, 1 in the
Honestly,
millions.
yeah.
Like, a rough way to go out for Lambi, but it is very emblematic of his attitude throughout Grandmasters, not throwing it down. It's not over till it's over. He has had the grind on his mind this entire time. He waves goodbye. He thinks he's dead, and very likely could be the Sethic is still active, right? Alutemu literally only needs 3 damage, a Void Shard, a Fortitude, a Bless will get the job done.
Yeah, Alutemu, if he could, believe me, he would close out this game as soon as possible. He doesn't want to be playing with his prey here, but he has to keep the train going because it's not quite there yet. We need Bless, Fortitude, Feast. That gives no bonus attack quite yet. That maybe can get there if the discounts play along as well. That's
there's
a Bless.
GG.
It's not playable though. He's still
it's not
technically dead.
Right, and he can't discount further with the Gassalon because it just blows up his board because most of them is one attack. Oh man, poor Lambi. Let the poor man rest.
Oh my god, no way.
You're kidding.
Don't make him do it. Come on. Okay, so if he can get, again, as I said, renew, Fortitude, like the absolute perfect series of cards. There's a theoretical out for him here, but the Idol of Yashaj is not going to be it. The train stops here. No way to get the Fortitude cheap enough. He throws down the concede, and Alutemu again, 1 game away from the World Championship in his potential final ever series of Grandmasters coming up at the end of the day.
What a roller coaster, Derek. My mind is still spinning. That was just too many emotions all at once. Like, it's no secret that you and I are huge Alutemu fans, but it's also no secret that you and I are huge Lambi series fans. And in fact, we would be so happy to see either of these players go through. And over on the other side, Alan and Mighty, completely deserving as well. Longtime Hearthstone players, even though Mighty himself is relatively new to Grandmasters. It's just such a heartbreaker that we can only send 1 player through to Worlds. But that is the way the cookie crumbles. Alutemu has been the favorite of so many players for so many years now. Has come so close to making it to Worlds, so close to winning a Masters Tour, and himself tweeted out last year, right? Possessi won the World Championship the year before that, Glory did, and Alutemu was saying, are you guys leaving me behind? They just have such a legacy behind them. But it could be this year that Alutemu manages to cement himself as one of the greats alongside 2 of his best friends. And that would be such a storyline indeed.
It would, yeah. I think you can make a very convincing argument that Alutemu has been the consistently highest level player of Asia Pacific over the last 3-4 years since the inception of Grandmasters. I think, honestly, I would hear out an argument that he's been the best player in the world over that region, although I know that, some of the other big performers over the last couple of years in Europe and Asia Pacific could potentially eclipse that. However, I would still absolutely contend he's the best player to not have gone to the World Championships possibly ever at this point, as he, we've seen Glory and Possessi as the 2 players he practices with a lot. They have been more prone to misplays, honestly, than Alutemu, I think, over the years, even though their own accomplishments at this point eclipse what Alutemu has done. His own accomplishments are now speaking for themselves. Most win in a Masters Tours of all time, through to another finals here of a Grandmasters playoffs, and a single series away from getting that spot at at the World Championship. After, as we said, having been here right from the start of GM. It's almost poetic in how it could end for Alutemu. But he still has to get through a very worthy foe, whether it be Mighty, whether it be Alan, both with these pretty much all-in aggro lineups.
Such exciting stuff. That was just our first series of the day, a gauntlet indeed. And again, our hearts go out to Lambi series. Played his heart out, had an incredible season, an incredible run through Grandmasters, and he just has one of the greatest overall positive attitudes and one of the best people, I would say, to follow along with their journey on social media if you haven't already. I don't think that's the last we will be seeing from him. However, it is now time to shift our focus, exactly as you said, to the series between Alan and Mighty, 2 aggro lineups, although slightly different in their techs here. Both of them hoping to run up into players that were not each other, honestly, because they are trying to target Kazakhstan Druid, but that is not available on either side. Can't wait to see how this one pans out.
Neither can I, and we will be jumping into that series very, very shortly. A quick break, but when we come back, Mighty versus Alan to find out our second finalist going up against Alutemu in the grand finals of this season of Hearthstone Grandmasters. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this one, and we'll be right back. One incredibly exciting semi-final down and one yet to come. One that I imagine, Gia, might be a little bit speedier because even though it could go all the way to game 5 here with our two players having pretty similar lineups, it's aggro all the way down. Quest Rogue, the only one you could argue, I think, for something other than a pure aggro deck at this point in the series. But some things never change, Gia. Even though it's full aggro, it is still just a double Druid ban, funnily enough, on both sides.
That is true. I really wanted to headline this matchup as a 16 Trog lineup, but that pesky Quest Rogue from Mighty means that there's not double Trog in every single deck here. But like you said, it is the mutual Druid ban, not Kazakhstan though, it is Beast Druid that we were talking a little bit about in the break, is probably the best aggro deck when it comes to aggro mirrors because it has so much more capability of going wide and refilling the board, and also can find answers that come in the form of spells because they're still running nature studies that it's generally not available to other aggro decks. You might make the argument that the Shadow Priest from Alan, traditionally, when we first saw Shadow Priest, it was kind of the king of the aggro decks because of the efficiency of the hero power being able to ping away minions and take value trades so consistently. But the particular build of Shadow Priest these days is not so focused on that, at least with Alan's lineup. Only one Kulturan Chaplain, so a bit less emphasis on board control, and no tour guides, which are some of the most important things to win aggro mirrors. Alan has built the priest to prey upon Kazakhstan druids, so he wants more of an aggressive stance, more spell disruption. But when it comes to this particular matchup, it is more about who gets control of the board.
Yeah, exactly. It's some old school Hearthstone where going first 9 times out of 10 puts you at a big advantage, obviously, especially with these decks like Paladin in particular, I think is the biggest culprit of this, right? Where hitting a 1-drop into a buff on 2 is just so important to hit, and stopping your opponent from disrupting that is, of course, very, very important. Mighty here going to be starting us off on this buff Paladin with a pretty cool build of it. I do like the inclusion of Akani in these early board-based decks because there's a few decks right now that do rely on deliberately falling behind in the first few turns and then catching up in the mid game. Druid because they want to ramp up first, Demon Hunter because they want to complete quest at first, and Okani / the Crossroads Watchpost, which Alan has included in addition to the Okani, does go a pretty long way in stopping their ability to actually fight back once they've hit their early game objectives, whatever that may be. But against another aggro deck, it becomes quite a lot worse, as Akani, as we found out, its effect only works if it's alive on the board. So if your opponent is already ahead or even on board, it's very often just a 4-mana 2/6, which is very underwhelming in these incredibly dense board-based decks where, you know, game plans A through Y are just getting down efficient stats as much as possible every single turn.
A lot to consider in these heavily board-based matchups, especially now that effects like Okani can add a little bit more to it than just the simple value trade every single time. Derek, we're actually in a series where AVT might just be correct. Always value trade. Not necessarily sure if it will always be available to take value trades, but for the Face Hunter in particular, I think it's so important that they keep the Paladin off board because, like you said, it's all about having a platform to land the buff spells, whereas Face Hunter, even if they do get off board towards the end game, they can still put together a lethal because they have burst spells, quick shot, and the aim shot being a key inclusion there, piercing shot as well. But there's one particular card on Mighty's side that can make Alan's life very difficult, and that's actually Hold the Bridge. That lifesteal capability, repeatedly making a minion a threat, can mean that Alan trying to go for burst in the late game is not a solid win condition.
This is an interesting starting hand for Mighty, and for Alan too, actually, for that matter, but I'll start with Mighty, where the double Sneaky Delinquent, you know, it's not a 1-drop, which is the ideal of what you want in all these aggro matchups, but Hunter really doesn't have much of a way to interact with 1-health stealth minions on the other side of the board, and so just coin Delinquent and hope to find the buffs off the top of your deck was something I was rather interested in.
Yeah, double Delinquent means that you're almost guaranteed to have a target. to be able to stealth it. And you can make the argument that having a 1-drop is less important when you're on the coin and you can go for straight into a 2 curve. But there's always the consideration of if your opponent goes Trog on turn 1, are you really going to coin out a minion? You'd rather have a 1-drop still. So I think Mighty was hedging a little bit by just keeping the 1 delinquent. And he knows that there's tons of other 2-cost cards in his deck that can make sure that even if he doesn't have a 1-cost, he can still go 2 into 2 curve nicely. Alan is starting off with Demon Companion, so it's not an absolute nightmare for Mighty. It is not a Trog, and the Noble Mount is huge here, especially that Alan whiffs on his turn 2.
Yep, it's really, really nice. And one thing I wasn't really considering for Mighty in these early turns is the text on Sneaky Delinquent, right? If you coin out on 1 and trade into something, you can just play the second half on turn 2 quite happily and then hope for a buff that way. As here for Alan, he's saying, right, if you're buff Paladin, go ahead, have some more buff spells, and I hope it serves you well. As Mighty here is presented with just a gorgeous start to the game, right? This Hold the Bridge was, wow, I thought such a nice way to lock down the board, but instead he's just doubling down on the Vindicator and gets the second Noble Mount to still get a VT with the Divine Shield and stick a 3-1 at the same time.
That's the best outcome. Most of the time he finds Hand of a Doll there, which is like, okay, it still lets you deal with the Mukla and you cycle, but you don't have an additional minion on board. But in this case, Mighty is simply running away with it. He can go for another Vindicator, and Hand of a Doll still a good outcome here, just to put on the 5-3, and then you can banana the 3-1 and have that trade the Warsong Commander. No, Wrangler, sorry. Scary thing is that you do leave a 3-1 on board potentially into a Rhino turn. But is that a big deal?
I am absolutely fine with that. Like, you're leaving 1 health minions in no matter what, and I think here by buffing up the attackable Vindicator here makes a lot of sense, and then you can just do banana on the 5-3, take a value trade, and keep all this damage coming face, because as I said, efficiency of stats is the way to go. And if you look at the raw amount of damage on this board, Rhino can attack into whatever the heck it wants. You are winning this race 7 ways this Sunday.
Very true. Oh, the 1 health on the Rhino is pretty awkward, to be fair, for Mighty. He doesn't have any like ping effects that are somewhat available to Alan with just quick shot to a certain extent. But it is fine. Mighty's just so far ahead. And the only thing he might be scared of here is Rinling's Rifle into Explosive Trap, I would say. Outside of that, this board setup is simply too annoying for Hunter to deal with.
And just getting the damage in now is something I absolutely love here for Mighty, taking the small little trades when he needs them. As, you know, not only is the immediate board in his favor, the inevitability also is in his favor. That Lightforged Carriel is just going to be the nail in the coffin if he ever gets around to playing it in the later stages of the game, because it gives him so much survivability and also so much lethal potential. Never underestimate that 2 damage from the weapon swing every single turn, just to match the Hunter's hero power in terms of its efficiency.
Here we go. Not lethal for Mighty just yet, but this Hold the Bridge, pretty much lethal, right? If you get that 10 attack lifesteal with the Divine Shield, you can banana the 1-1 to VT the 1-2. You can play the Righteous Protector. Who cares if you float mana at this point? It is simply too much for Alan to come back from. And I think Alan knows it. Not a single signal of him feeling unfavored here. I think he already knows that this matchup wasn't going to go in his favor from the beginning. Not even going to respect the Rhino, sure. It really doesn't do that much here. That is simply a lethal setup from Mighty. No Rinling's Rifle for Alan. And that looks like it's just our game 1 in the books.
Pretty simple, right? It's just game over. This is what Face Hunter struggles with so often, is what it's doing at the start is a lot of damage. Against decks that don't fight for board, Face Hunter really starts piling on that pressure incredibly quickly. But what it doesn't do is fight efficiently against other board-based decks, against the likes of Aggro Druid, Shadow Priest, Buff Paladin, Quest Rogue, I would argue, Burn Shaman, I would argue as well. Everything it's doing is just less efficient. It's bottom of the food chain in terms of these aggro matchups. And so with just a Carriel here to close out the game, Mighty's efficiency of mana expenditure brute forces his way through to a victory in game 1.
Time speed run on the first game of the fastest series we might see all weekend goes to Mighty. Again, I don't think Alan should be particularly upset about that. His expression shows that he knew he was not particularly favored from that instance, especially not having Trog on turn 1, which is sort of the get out of jail free card when you're unfavored in aggro mirrors. If you force your opponent to have to coin to answer it, suddenly you can get enough of a presence that the trade battles swing back in your favor. But in terms of what Alan can do to fight back, he knows that Mighty has only the Hunter and the Quest Rogue remaining, so there's potential to see a mirror here if Alan wants to run it back with the Paladin. There's also just Shadow Priest, which I feel is a pretty interesting one when it's compared to Hunter and Rogue, because I said it is a little bit stocks down compared to the old version of it with Tour Guide, but I think it's still very much capable of winning damage races as you get off to a fast enough one-drop start.
Yep. Absolutely right. And so that means with now the Paladin out of the way, Mighty is still left with his own pesky Hunter, which is, I think, probably going to be the biggest win for both of these players if they can find it on either side. And his Quest Rogue, interestingly enough, which I don't think we've seen all too much interaction between Quest Rogue and aggro, because the main reason we've seen it brought is, as we've said time and again, to have a good matchup against the Demon Hunter and a good matchup against some of the other tertiary fourth decks rolling around in the metagame, like Miracle Priest, Libram Paladin as well. But can you speak a little bit to Quest Rogue versus aggro? Is this generally a matchup you're happy to face? Or is it not hitting the intended matchups that we talked about earlier?
I honestly think it's pretty close because there are specific Quest Rogue hands that absolutely dumpster aggro, like early Operative Agent. If you can fit in a Foxy Fraud, it's huge as well to get that tempo. And against aggro, if you push them off the board early, you pretty much just don't lose from that point. It snowballs really, really quickly. But the fact that you have to expend turn 1 playing the quest is a big deal because Trog is a very real threat and that can get out of control quickly as well. It's also highly dependent on what kind of gizmos you get. I think overall tends to come out slightly in Quest Rogue's favor, but definitely not quite an extreme favorable. And there's the Trog, Alan on the top. It never fails him.
And Mighty, the difference is, I mean, this is worse than corrupted insight into Drekthar, right? It's my opponent doesn't have a Trog, and then they do. Head in his hands. He's ready to give up already. But how do you feel, buddy, about not one, but the double Trog on turn 2 with Divine Shield as well? These bad boys ain't going anywhere.
Le double Trog? Oh no!
Le double Trog.
I will hunt you down, says Alan, and he's not false advertising whatsoever. Mighty has to wait until turn 3 to finally play down his Operative, and Alan can punish with a, I was going to say a buff spell, but Mukla on curve, absolutely, sign me up. This is quite literally bananas.
It is. Mighty's got himself a good response, though, in the form of a stealthed Operative. Yes, it's not progressing the quest, but who cares? It's much more important to get this board under control. Also, the fact that it is stealthed is very important. Being able to use it alongside a couple of bananas or an extortion to clear off the Mukla is a really nice way to start pushing back if Alan can give him a clean board for the next couple of turns.
I was shocked to see the quest hovered there. I felt like the whole point of the setup is to kill both Trogs before you play any spells. Obviously, he's taking a ton of damage, and Alan is still so far in the lead here because even though Mighty has a good shot at pushing Alan off board next turn, now that the extortion's finally playable, Alan can simply morph into Face Hunter mode from this point where he just plays damage spells, presses the hero power every single turn, and that should be enough to race Mighty at this point since Mighty's rogue. He doesn't have healing, doesn't have ways to disrupt the damage from Alan. Simply quick shot hero power, Rhino on the next turn or another hero power. It just gets the job done.
Absolutely agree. Even if it's not going to end up being Rhino on the following turns, you have so many draws that make it worth to play the quick shot here. Obviously, aim shot being number 1, but second, quick shot, piercing shot, a lot of draws that just make it a lot better to get the mana spent on sending it face rather than removing minions. Speaking of removing minions, though, I do think Mighty has finally garnered himself an actually full board clear on this turn, and he can leave the board completely empty if he wants to, leading up into a potential Rhino turn. But I think he's actually, in the end, just putting down the Foxy Fraud and just praying that there's nothing there, because honestly, he has to win the game some way, right? Which means he has to play minions this game.
It's the same kind of catch-22 we saw from old Garrote Rogue versus old Face Hunter, and old Face Hunter is pretty much the same as it is now, where if you don't put a minion on board, you're just kind of dying to hero powers over time. So you just have to somehow hope that the Rhino isn't there, but it is, and the game is not over on the very next turn necessarily, but it kind of is.
I love how Alan is like such a conundrum. He's low-key one of the nicest guys I know in Hearthstone, but also low-key one of just the biggest dirtbags in Hearthstone. Like, thanking his opponent for playing a minion and then going Rhino is such BM. I can't imagine treating an opponent like that in Hearthstone, but oh, I love to see it.
I think Alan absolutely knows his heel status in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
And tells us how to play up his story and explains when we are being idiots and calling the wrong lines when Alan is thinking something completely different. SI7 agent, pretty good, sure, but Rinling hero power into Rinling hero power again is lethal.
Yeah, it's not getting there unless we can see again, as we have seen a couple times, Smuggler. In order to get yourself a taunt, even alongside a couple of bananas, who knows?
And I feel like Alan just kind of emotes for the camera, basically, because at this point, people should just be auto-squelching him when they face Alan. They should already know. It's a reflex.
This is for Alan. This is for himself. This is me time for Alan. How he relaxes himself is just being really mean to his opponents, which... I'm all here for. BGBM obviously offers up a huge amount of damage next turn alongside the bananas, but it is quite certainly not going to be getting there, and a monumental win does come through for Alan. The Face Hunter managing to get over the finish line here does mean that, as I said, the weakest of the anti-verse aggro, sorry, the weakest of the aggro versus aggro decks is over the finish line for him, and he can now move on to the much more palatable matchups of Priest and Paladin.
Paladin, though, I want to say is not super palatable into Quest Rogue. Quest Rogue just pulls very far in the lead there. Again, if they don't get trogged on turn 1. Outside of that, most of the minions played down early for the Paladin are interactable just by rushing into them or going SI7 extortion, and then it snowballs very far in the control of the Rogue, because as they get gizmos, they get even more efficient ways of dealing with minions in general. There is a way that the buff Paladin can cheese out victories outside of trogs, which is mainly in the form of stealth minions, if they can set up a sneaky delinquent slash... Oh, sorry, there's no SI7 Skulker here for the list of Alan, but it's fine. The sneaky delinquent sticking around and then an authority setup. Sometimes you can just get there with the Battlegrounds Battlemaster because it's very tough for Rogue to interact with those stealth minions nowadays Rogues do not run Shadowcrafter Scabs.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the stealth are a really nice way to lock down that early board. It's also worth mentioning that there is actually a comeback mechanism in this deck for the buff Paladin. It very rarely rears its head, but Blademaster Samuro in there, if you choose to include it instead of the Carriel Roam, as I think is a little bit more common, does actually allow Alan a chance to fight back in the mid game. Like if he can get a Hand of Adal is the ideal one to get, or even just like play Samuro and then buff it next turn. Like, you know, there's some weird things you can go for that do allow you to get a swing back against the Rogue. But undeniably, as you so eloquently put it earlier, it's Trog number 1. Maybe not quite so eloquent to say Trog good, but it's true nonetheless in this matchup. And then Stealth as number 2 is a very nice way to lock down the board.
Eloquent it may not be, but accurate it is indeed.
True. Oh,
wow, what an opener for Mighty, but that's a trog for Alan again. Key difference though, Alan is going second this time, so Mighty can still play the quest, guaranteed turn 1 without an immediate punish.
He can, yeah, it's the easiest full keep of your entire life for Mighty. This is the dream hand in this matchup. You're going first, you got the perfect curve, and like you said, your opponent can't disrupt with the Trog. The one thing he needs to pray for is that there's no Trog plus a bunch of buff spells, one after the other, because even though he can very obviously deal with just a Trog in the form of Operative on 3, if the Skulker doesn't deal with it first already, thanks to its stealth, Trog plus the Noble Mount plus Hold the Bridge or plus Hand of Adal, you know, then it starts to get a little bit more complicated. But basically, this should still be a nice, easy start to the game for Mighty.
All the rest of Alan's hand, though. What is this double authority? And Samuro has reared its head here. Oh no, Battlemaster. Alan, this is not the hand. Okay, it does look like it's going to be one of those games where he needs Samuro to pull him back because he's going to fall behind so quickly here. And that's just going to be a very strange pan out because honestly, Samuro, like I looked at it and said, oh, hold the bridge, Samuro? That's kind of like Apotheosis, right? No, it's not. It has Divine Shield. It won't get Frenzy.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would be pretty sick. But yeah, as Alan tries to wade through this absolute pile of garbanzo beans in this starting hand, Mighty is just very happily moving along. This hand is going from good to better. 2-mana SI7 agent, a Shadow Step to either get him more discount on the Skulker or more tempo in the form of Operative or Agent being stepped. Swindle for card draw. There is just absolutely everything you could possibly want to get your hands on available to him right out the gate. Meanwhile, Alan is pressing Hero Power on turn 2 and turn 3 in an aggro board-based buff deck. Puke.
Yeah, quite simply. That's eloquent as well, isn't it? Agent, Shadow Step, Agent doesn't even need to play the Swindle. Just get as far ahead on board as you possibly can. And even though Samuro is something you're afraid of, it's not that strong as early as turn 4. Even with coin save for Alan, he can't play Hand of a Doll on it quite yet. And honestly, that's the only buff spell that's relevant at this point because, again, playing Hold the Bridge or Noble Mount gives Samuro Divine Shield so it won't get the Frenzy.
Yeah, I was considering if it just ended up being play the Cutlass there because it's not bad just to have a 2-attack weapon equipped for the next turn as well to clear the runway for your minions to go face. But I do think, you know, you can't necessarily trust Swindle to solve all your card draw problems for the rest of the game. So trading that is probably a little bit more prudent. However, Alan is finding himself the kind of hand that can pull this one back. It's a very suspicious hand, of course, because he had 3 cards in his starting hand that have not been played. Neither has the coin. So I do think Mighty will be well aware of the threat of Samuro. But honestly, there's not much he can do about it right now. It's just straight up good.
True. There's not enough minions that he can leave stealthed. He can't quite kill off his SI7 agent, so the only minions on board are stealthed. And then the Samuro has nothing to target into, and that I feel is a little bit too fancy anyway. You probably just say, okay, you can get the clear, but I'm chugging along with the quest very nicely. But that is super clutch for Alan that he picked up exactly Hand of a Doll, because we said Noble Mount not doing the job with the Divine Shield. Hold the bridge. Wait.
Liatron Shadow Step!
That's so
it's infinite value!
What the?
So if you target one of your own minions with Extortion, you can then just go like Liatron Step Extortion every single turn. Oh, it's so sick.
That would be pretty funny indeed. But obviously not the immediate concern here. Mighty with a shake of the head, this is exactly what he didn't want to see. Alan's only real comeback mechanism. I'm so glad you brought it up before the start of the game, Darek. It's so relevant here. And that's a whiff of a draw.
He's just kind of winning now. I don't know how this happened. I mean, obviously the Samuro is the big one, but Mighty has no playable SI cards in hand unless he wants to extortion his own Foxy Fraud, which sounds apocalyptically bad. No way to get scabs right now because I think he's only at 4 out of 6, right? Not 5 out of 6.
Yeah, I think the solace he can take is he has Fizz Flash here, because the scariest thing about leaving a minion on board from Paladin is they buff it, right? So at least for one minion, you can Fizz Flash it back. I do agree with the trading of the... Oh, it is scabs. Okay, okay. That's a huge deal.
My bad. Very big difference.
Yeah. Even so, even if he had the guaranteed scabs in hand with just Foxy and Extorted, I like the trade. There's so many good outcomes. Secret Passage, any SI card was playable at that point, and he gets one of the best ones from the Smuggler. Just deciding whether he should Fizz Flash the Samuro, and I was going to say, oh my god, I thought he shouldn't, because the Samuro being playable again in 2 turns time is honestly something to be concerned about. But I guess Mighty is just saying, scabs playable next turn, you just get the lethal before Samuro can come back.
It's interesting though, right? Because Samuro is very potent as we just saw, make no mistake. But there's not much that actually goes well with it, right? Because Noble Mount, Divine Shield doesn't work, Hold the Bridge doesn't work, Blessing of Authority isn't going to be playable until turn 8 if you had the coin, and turn 9, which because he's already used it. And so it's only exactly second Adul, which actually gives him the board clear. And now, despite me saying that Alan was just low-key winning, because there was the activation of Scabs, which I thought was one turn further away, Mighty is now able to start reaping the advantage of Alan having such a slow start to the game.
Wow, paying complete respect to the board as well. It's Fizz Flash, which is made expensive by the Neophyte, over 2 treasure gizmos from Mighty. And he knows that as long as he respects the board, there's no capability of building a taunt minion or getting lifesteal from Hold the Bridge. And so it's a very clean lethal setup from Mighty. However,
Gia, we've learned this is lethal for Mighty. Stealth the taunt. Stealth the taunt.
You're
Plain Noggin Fogger on an opposing minion. You give Wind Fury to the rest of your board. This is lethal.
Wind Fury to the rest. Yeah, basically. Because, Derek, you cannot target a stealth minion, and therefore it cannot taunt.
Oh no!
Oh my goodness! Honestly, I didn't know this interaction until you brought it up, and Donkey brought it up, but yeah, he doesn't know. I bet Alan knows. Alan always knows. That's what I've learned this season.
Is it lethal anyway? I mean, he might have found an alternate route. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But yeah, it's exact. Sorry, it's still there. He finds an alternate way to get there with just the 14 from the Battle Master plus the Scab. So nicely done, Mighty. It's you know, this is not the most elegant of ways of getting there. This is like what Fermat's last theorem being solved with 1,000 pages rather than just the nice 3 lines scribbled apparently in the side of his notebook, which was just a Noggin Fog generator. But either way, it got the job done there, and it does mean that he is going through 2 games to 1 in the lead now.
Very nice to see. Mighty definitely taking the scenic route towards the end there, and I really, really hope that he'll check the VODs after this, because it's an interaction that really doesn't come to your head unless you've seen it before. Admittedly, it can happen to the best of us. Found an alternate route to lethal, but that might not always be there later on, and certainly Alan will try and punish him for it at a later point. However, that's a quest rogue done and dusted for Mighty. Only has now the Hunter to get a win with in the Paladin matchup potentially, which we just saw went heavily in Mighty's favor when it was the other way around. So Alan potentially still has just one good matchup for him into a slightly more contentious one with the Shadow Priest.
Yeah, I think that Alan has got himself 2 favorable matchups left over. The Shadow Priest one is a little bit closer because, as you very correctly pointed out a couple times, the Shadow Priest for Alan is not built for the aggro matchups. He's got himself Mucklet in there, which is, you know, a little bit shaky in these aggro matchups, even though it can be good just to get a lot of stats online. It's mainly an anti-Druid, anti-DH card. Traveling Merchant, that is not an anti-aggro card. That is firmly an anti-DH, anti-Druid card. Voracious Reader, Akani, Crossroads Rochpost, a lot of very weak cards, which means that even though I definitely still hear the argument that Shadow Priest is still favored versus Face Hunter because of the efficiency of their early minions, because of the efficiency of a 2 damage hero power that can target minions, it's going to be a lot closer than it otherwise would be.
Before we see the Priest come out to play, though, it's going to be the Paladin. And while you did talk about all these clunky minions that might not be so good in aggro mirrors for Alan's Shadow Priest, the same can be said of Mighty's build of Hunter, which is, of course, teched to be stronger against Kazakhstan Druid. There's a King Mukla in there and Moonfang. Not particularly good cards in the aggro matchup, but he has hit a very nice opening hand, which is going wide, right? He has the potential to buff minions and create himself many attacking minions, which means he has a lot more flexibility on how he dictates the trades. This is one way to get very much ahead of Paladin in the early game.
Yeah, it's just value trade city, right? You attack in, you use the Org Merchant, I think, to take out the remaining 2-1, because I don't think you're going to have too much value off of a Divine Shield and then value trade later on. So I would just rather get a little bit more immediate power in play. And Adorable Infestation is always going to have a target next turn, so you don't worry about that at all.
Close though. I kind of like the adorable number 2 because it technically gets you one more 1/1 on this board state.
That's fair. Yeah.
I mean, sorry, then you delete a 2/1. I'm trying to imagine it. Yeah, it's actually the same, right? It comes out to 2 2/1s and 2 1/1s. If you play the adorable and value traded instead of the Og Merchant.
Yes, sure. Yeah. It's about the same. Yeah.
So in that case, I kind of still like adorable just because like there's neophytes on the other side potentially maybe disrupting it, but not a huge deal overall. The main thing is that Mighty is starting to concern himself with building a board state that's not so weak to Samuro. Obviously, he's just seen coin, so that's not an immediate concern.
Yeah.
But now, the Noble Mount, actually, even though this looks like a board state that's very weak to 1 and 2 damage, the fact that there's a 1/1 horse with Divine Shield underneath this incentivizes Mighty to just ignore this, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, this is currently a full trade, right? 4 minions for 4 minions. You can take some value trades now by killing off the 1/1 horse with a 2/2 instead. But like you say, do you really want to be messing around with that? You could instead just go super wide, send this all to the dome, and hope to get there that way, as there's only one Hold the Bridge, I think, in Alan's deck, so the actual healing potential is rather limited. Face damage sticks quite often.
I like this a lot. It means you also preserve your Wilpertinger for the Warsong Wrangler turn. At least one of them survives, and in this case, both of them, so he gets the nice...
Oh!
Oh, no! No! Never mind! Everything I said is wrong. He draws the Tinger, so now the Warsong Wrangler can only pull Mukla or Kodobane, not Kodobane, Moonfang. There's no Rhino in the deck. That's a disaster.
Moonfang, right? It's terrible. That is the worst draw in his deck by a country mile.
He could technically play it and aim shot still, but I agree. I prefer the Wrangler and continue to ignore this board state from Alan. You are walking into Samuro territory, true, but it's a one-off.
Yeah, we're not playing around Samuro here, especially after your opponent already utilized the coin. Yeah. Alan thinking, oh god, these are all going to get buffed. Little does he know, that's not even an option. He is incredibly confused by that outcome. And then I think he realized, oh, Wolpertinger in hand. Okay, my life's not so bad.
Yeah. Sorry, the complete story that we had in the facial expressions of our two players was amazing. Oh, the bridge. But it's going to be Squawker first for another Noble Mount.
Again, here just offers him so much board control. He can really start trading away and force Mighty to try and hit lethal through either burst damage or the Moonfang, which is admittedly a very, very big threat. But the Hold the Bridge just offers him so much life gain, so much time to build his way up to the carry on turn 7.
Yeah, that really is the end goal for Alan here. It's not even getting to lethal himself. It's playing Carriel stabilizing, and it will almost certainly clear the board by that point. So how does he bridge the gap to turn 7? And even if the next turn is just hero power hold the bridge, the fact that he will almost guaranteed have a target with which to land the hold the bridge, even if he expends his stealth minion here, means that he will have so much more time. Even if turn 6 is just Mr. Smite, it should be enough to stabilize. I think Alan is pulling in the lead here. I do respect him taking the trade here because, again, this board state with double Divine Shield, you're almost certain to still have a hold the bridge target. Felma. Go away. You're not here for this matchup or any matchup except Druid and Demon Hunter.
Yeah, this game is feeling more and more like it's all in on the Moonfang to be able to get it done. And although Alan can obviously not kill it on this turn, he can heal up so much from the rest of this board and get himself in a situation where 8 damage a turn, scary as it may be, might not be enough to actually close out the game.
Ooh, Fang. Okay, he can only heal for 6 maximum here, to be fair, if he holds the Parrot. And it always feels weird to do that because in order to maximize the Divine Shield value, you don't get the immediate heal, right? Because you want to ping off the shield with a trade and then give it the heal. But then he can't really afford to not take the heal this turn because the Moonfang is representing too much damage. So I think he has to hold the bridge and potentially go face with the Parrot and just put the 1/1 and the 2/1.
I mean, he has to start training though. Like, even just looking at this aim shot for Mighty, it's actually just kind of getting there. He does 7 with that, 8 with the Moonfang, 1 from the 1 minion that's probably left over on board. That's 16, which is just 2 off lethal if you factor in the 6 heal from Alan on this turn, which means hero power alone is just going to get there next turn, I think.
I was gonna say yes, but like if you take an inefficient trade, they still kind of have to kill your 6/6, right? Doesn't it offset the clock? Oh, not quite, right? The Moonclang, yeah, is still too much damage. Fair enough.
2 out of 3 for lethal right now. That's the refer. I think that's just game right. You've got 10, 12, plus the 7 from the aim shot.
Oh my god. That top deck was insane here. Even though Alan took the maximum healing with the hold the bridge, he traded off as much as he could while also putting damage in the Moonfang. And even if he traded an additional 1-1, he was still dead to this outcome from Mighty. Mighty with the quickest victory you have ever seen. 3-1. That's just the series done and dusted. We didn't even get to see the Shadow Priest. And despite the long build-up that we had between Lambi series and Alutamu, I'm getting whiplash here. I have so many things to say about Alan's Grandmasters, but take it away, Derek. You can go first.
I mean, obviously we have to say for Alan, this is another heartbreaking moment, right? Another close call. He got through to the finals at the end of the last season, narrowly didn't make it through after an unbelievable 17-1 end to the season that he had in terms of overall series score, one of the greatest runs in Grandmasters history. This season, he gets through to the semifinals, brings an absolutely genius aggro lineup. I thought so perfectly tuned to take down the Druids game after game after game. But in the end, when facing Mighty, the opposing style of aggro just proved to be a little bit too much for him, where he hadn't teched his lineups to be able to deal with the aggro. But for Mighty, the man of the hour now, getting the victory there, he has come from absolutely nowhere and just proven himself to be one of the strongest contenders in APAC GM. We honestly hadn't even seen him that much in the Masters Tour system, which we at least usually get a bit of a preview of our Grandmasters when they get, you know, top 8, top 4, maybe higher in a Masters Tour. Mighty didn't even have that deep of a run in Masters Tours. He just consistently hit a good Swiss score, which was just enough to squeeze him through into the Grandmasters system. And now he's one game or one series away from going through to the World Championship, with the 2 players at the furthest ends of the spectrum away from each other in their stays in Grandmasters. Alutemu, one of the original 16 Grandmasters. Mighty, just now making a name for himself in competitive Hearthstone, and both equally exciting prospects to have as our representative through to the World Champs.
So many parallels we can draw. The old guard versus the new, the Trog player versus the Kazakhstan player. Who is it going to be in the end? I'm just so excited that it's panned out this way, because even though we haven't gotten to spend so much time with Mighty in Grandmasters, I think he is an absolutely amazing addition to the program in its last couple hours, it feels like. Mighty, like you said, not particularly a famous name from the Masters Tour systems, but a consistent performer, and you can absolutely see why. He has very clever lineup choices throughout all the different formats that we featured this season. In Trio, he had the winning lineup as well, even though it didn't quite translate into a win of that week. And he had good performances to put him all the way in the 2nd seed, only next to Chonsu coming into playoffs. And he has already, I think, built up quite a big name for himself, getting love from the Pony Dojo practice group. He's a very fun personality as well. And I think that the Indian Hearthstone scene has always had a little something bubbling underneath the surface. I don't think it's a particularly popular game over there. Not too many pro players I'm familiar with, but there are the likes of Tirth, who have gotten wins at the Asian Games before, and they are very much supportive of each other. They've been hyping up Mighty, and for good reason. He is such a talented player, but this is going to be the biggest challenge of his career so far. No exaggeration whatsoever. It's Alutemu, the winningest player in the Masters Tour system, and one of our favorites throughout Grandmasters' entire history. Who's gonna take it, Derek? Can't wait.
Can't call it. It's too close to say, as it is going to be, as we've said many times before. The aggro from Mighty and the traditionally good decks. The standard lineup from Alutemu, one of the players who defined what the standard lineup was in the first place here in Asia Pacific, bringing that Rally Priest before it was cool, before Gabby got the win with it in the Masters Tour. And it really is anybody's game. We'll break it down more fully once we head into the grand finals. But for now, we're going to take a slightly longer break, I imagine, to allow Mighty a little time to prepare, get his band sorted out, and make sure he is all ready to go. So when we come back in 10 minutes time, the final series of the season for APAC Grandmasters, and we will know who the first player going through to the 2022 Hearthstone World Championships will be. Make sure you're here, because when it starts, it's going to be non-stop action, and we'll be with it right after this. It's time for the grand finals of this season of Hearthstone Grandmasters. The final finals of Grandmasters as we know it, Gia, because even though we have Last Call to come later on this year, that's an entirely different kettle of fish with all the regions jumbled together. So for a pure APAC finals here, this is the last one we're going to get. And as I said just before the break, it's a perfect combination of players. The oldest guard versus the newest guard in Alutemu versus Mighty for all the marbles and that single spot, all or nothing, at the World Finals.
It's the finals of the final season of Grandmasters, and it is, no matter what, Alutemu's final game in Hearthstone Grandmasters. He has not qualified to the last call. Mighty, even if he doesn't take it here, potentially we could see him later on, but of course he would much rather get that ticket through to Worlds right here and now. For Alutemu though, no second chances. If he is making through it to Worlds through the Grandmaster system, he has to win this series, and he has done so before many times, winning series all throughout this weekend, but not particularly against an aggro player, right? I feel like he's been paired with the same sort of lineup many times, and when he got through versus Alan, it was a little bit of an upset, I would say.
Well, he never actually even had to face Alan, right, in the matches on
you're right,
Friday, because he just sailed through the upper bracket, taking down Chonsu after beating Possessi in the initial match. So he hasn't actually had to face a full-on aggro lineup yet, which, as you say, is, I think, a very big part of his success so far, getting through to the finals, because with Mighty being on the other side of the board and his very specific style of aggro, it leads to an interesting point where I think he doesn't have as hard of a target on the Druid as you would traditionally expect when you're going for an aggro strategy in this metagame. He has good matchups against Druid almost across the board, but the Rogue is the potential weak point in that full target Druid strategy. However, that is not necessarily good news for Alutemu, because where his Druid picks up a bit of percentage, his Demon Hunter, and his Priest for that matter as well, I would argue, drops a fair bit in overall win percentage. So Alutemu, I'm going to call it right now, has got a pretty big uphill climb if he wants to be taking this victory and going to Worlds.
Right, there is a lot that comes down to, honestly, Q order in this matchup, because Mighty has gone for a bit more of an aggro hybrid approach to his lineup, where he does have 3 Trog decks and then the Quest Rogue, like you said, which gives him a bit of a leg up if he does run into other aggro players. Like we just saw Mighty taking down Alan very convincingly, but he still has the possibility to target Druid and then soft target Demon Hunter. Mighty throws his hands up though and kept a very conservative curve, I want to say, with a guaranteed turn 1, turn 2, and then Okani, and usually you have drawn a 3-drop by that point or something to do on turn 3. But I gotta say, I was surprised.
Okay, the pickup of Adorable Infestation is very interesting now, because I was going to say, I think you can fill out your turn with Adorable this turn and then go for the Neophyte next turn, because generally turn 3 is the turn that's more valuable to disrupt your opponent. It stops kind of Sethic Coin and a bunch of stuff, or Palm Reading specifically as the obvious big breakpoint.
And in this case, it would have stopped Coin Drekthar if the Neophyte came down 1 turn later. And if Mighty had gone for that, then he could bridge the gap into Okani, into counter minion. However, I think Mighty here just trying to get the most amount of stats on board right now and potentially disrupt Coin Nazmani is also something that he had on his mind. But it leads now to a pretty lackluster turn 3, and Alutemu is going to have the undisrupted Coin Drekthar, and then Okani is looking pretty sad after that. This one could slip away very quickly from Old Mighty here.
But this is the point for Alutemu, right? Yes, he has access to Coin Drekthar, but does he seize that opportunity? Because if there is not exactly Blade Master Akani on the other side, Palm Readings into Drekthar offers for potential immediate pop-off. He can go Drekthar, Coin, Devour, maybe get down an Insight, maybe get down a Gift as well. He could really start to pop off all at once. Whereas if he goes Coin, Drekthar, a lot of his board could just get wiped off.
Now, the Drekthar itself can be traded by Neophyte if he does get an outcome of 1 Sethik, 1 Nazmani. It's not a full clear. I honestly think this is enough stats to justify going in now. Not only does it play around Akani, but it plays around second Neophyte also, which would have shut down a lot of the preparation he would have gone for with the palm reading. Really rough for Mighty to have to take this down. Piercing shot does afford him a full clear though.
Yeah, and I think you just have to seize it. It's honestly a blessing that you're able to kill off this board at all on turn 4. But he actually takes the interesting route of not fully VTing away the board, which is, I think, overall a reasonable play to go for. But oh my goodness, does this just fall perfectly into Alutemu's trap here. This Shadow Word Devour is absolutely bananas.
And he gets to raise that too, so he can even play Nazmani on top of that. I was going to say, Devour to clear the board, amazing. But against Hunter, you might not necessarily have the time to palm reading. So I do favor just getting another threat on board alongside the Devour. This one is looking kind of over.
It's not looking great, is it? Currently no healing for Alutemu, I will say. So Mighty, if he has a hand full of damage, can maybe hope to eke out a win. There's currently no way to kill this Moonfang, so there's the potential that this could go face alongside an aim shot for another 7 damage next turn. Like, it's getting close, but there are so many things that Alutemu can generate to pull himself out of range. All 3 of these options, honestly, had their merit.
Right, I was honestly looking at Gift and just trying to push for a counter lethal, but this is just a safe option, right? He can kill off the Moonfang and regenerate the board with the discounts from the Nazmani. It's too strong. Mighty is getting pushed out of this one in record time indeed. Just in the blink of an eye, but honestly, there were so many interesting decisions throughout this early game, like the timing of Neophyte, the timing of Drekthar, and in this particular pan out, it comes out very far ahead in Alutemu's favor, because what does Mighty do about this board?
It's pretty disgusting, isn't it? He gets himself 2 Sethics on board, plus a Holy Smite, plus another Thrive in the Shadows. This is just getting discounted, discounted, discounted. As long as he does not get a selection of literally completely dead draws for 2 turns in a row, I think this one should be going very nicely in Alutemu's favor. And Renew is absolutely perfect in terms of the types of cards he's looking for. This is all just a dream.
Even if he had dead draws for 2 turns, he just has an 11-10. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, true.
Okay, it is going somewhere. Face. And Mighty is going to game 2 with a very resigned expression.
Yeah, it's a bad way to start the series. Make no mistake for Mighty. His opponent had the absolute dream hand and played it perfectly, dodging this Akani, making this keep for Mighty honestly just look foolish at this point. Not to say it was, but the way it panned out here was just the absolute worst case scenario. And it's honestly something you can kind of start to plan out. If your opponent has coined Drekthar, which you know they have the coin and there's a good shot they have the Drekthar, Akani's not getting anything done. You have to get such a strong start to make it worth it, to the point where they don't even feel comfortable going coin Drekthar because they need to hit something else just to stem the aggression along the way. And as we can see, Mighty did quite clearly not hit that, and so Alutemu was able to hit that incredible power ceiling that we know Priest can do. However, the bright side is that it is not necessarily the most important of decks for Alutemu to win with, as the Druid and the Demon Hunter still remain as potential weak spots.
That's right. We didn't highlight it at the beginning, but Mighty, of course, didn't ban Druid, as we've only seen previously today, whether it was aggro Druids banned away or Kazakhstan Druids because it was standard lineups facing each other. When Mighty is the aggro lineup facing up against his target, he does leave up both Demon Hunter and Kazakhstan Druid, gets rid of the Quest Rogue, the Warrior instead. Alutemu not running Quest Rogue. Of course, the Warrior, the most effective anti-aggro deck, so Mighty absolutely does not want to see it. So in some ways, that first win from Alutemu is his best and easiest deck to get a win with in the series, theoretically, because the Demon Hunter still has some good matchups in there, in the Hunter, but against Quest Rogue and against Buff Paladin, it can get tricky. And then the Druid has 0 good matchups on paper.
That's right. Yeah. That's where things I think could get really a little bit closer overall. But for the Buff Paladin, for the moment, is, I think, a nice safe way for Mighty to try and get a win on the table. Going to be going up against the Druid from Alutemu, so he's comfortable getting in with the tough decks. And even though I don't think we have seen... oh no, sorry, I take that back. I think we have seen once Druid beat the aggro lineup here in Asia Pacific. With Lambi series taking a win against Mighty on his Druid against the, well, the weapon rogues, sorry, the quest rogues, so not really a full aggro lineup. Over in Europe, there have been a few instances of this Druid taking a win against the full aggro strategies, and especially because Alutemu has got himself that version that we've discussed at length that is a little bit stronger against aggro with a, weirdly enough, a stronger top end that allows you to actually stabilize the board if you're able to ramp up to it.
Yeah, that's right. Ramping and taking a beating in the early game just to give you enough mana to finally seal the board with Onyxia is the name of the game here at Mighty with the full mull. Praying for a good outcome, and there it is. The Trog and Alutemu, I can hear exactly his reaction here, even without the audio. But he has a very respectable hand for himself. This is Overgrowth Guff.
Yeah, he does. I do think you probably have to go for the game plan we've seen time and again, where you just let your opponent have a full board of Trogs. Honestly, once you get to the point that there's like 3 on board, it's just better to fill it up entirely because it stops your opponent from playing the bigger threats, like the Squawker or whatever it is in the mid game.
Second scale picked up. Pretty big deal. As it's going for Mighty, I don't think 1 scale is going to be enough to fill out or clear out the entire board, but it will help stabilize at some point. Second Neophyte, though, is an absolute backbreaker for Alutemu. His entire plan was to overgrowth and then get an early scale down, but that is no longer possible.
All right, so we're looking at, I think, still just happily spending our mana on this turn, right? Because next turn we can still just go 4 mana overgrowth or coin guff, alternatively as well. Obviously, the downside is that you add 2 more power to your opponent's side of the board. In which case, yeah, maybe it's not worth it to play the guess the wait. But honestly, I was thinking just getting yourself a Bloom to play Scale of Onyxia next turn was pretty tempting.
Yeah. I think Alutemu just didn't want to erode his nature studies discount because technically he could go overgrowth coin 2-cost card next turn or a hero power if he needs to. Maybe the coin gets saved for something else, but it does just afford him a little bit more flexibility because on paper, everything he needs to stabilize is in hand. He just doesn't have the time.
Okay, so coin guff is not quite so clean as you would usually like it to be because you chew up the discount, as we've said, from the nature studies, and also you can't fit in the hero power for ramp at the same time.
Or it could just be overgrowth in the end.
Right, like you could start with guess the weight, as I said, and hope to hit a Bloom or an Innovate, so Scale of Onyxia is playable next turn.
How much damage is he even looking at? If he just completely fills up the board, there's going to be this 11 plus 2, 13. He's alive at 2, and then just dead to hold the bridge. Yep.
Realistically, we are already very firmly at the point where... Oh, okay. I was going to say where he needs to go for a big Scenarium Ward in order to survive off the top, but that is just going to be game.
If I did my math right, 3, 6, 9... That can still go face, and then another... Yeah, wait.
Oh, no! It was lethal!
Did I
That was
out?
lethal!
It was, right? With Hold the Bridge?
I think so.
Yeah. Wait.
He just saw... Yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, no. Not like this.
Okay, come on. That's fine. Whatever. You're still winning this game. Don't let it get to you, man. You've got to still just be playing at the absolute best of your ability. Pretend it never happened. As Alutemu here, Scale of Onyxia, Iron Bug, it's a strong play, but we know it's not game winning. But Battlemaster or Mr. Smite is still going to close this one out.
Yes, it will. It's a best as a stabilization as you could go for because it requires Mighty to have another source of damage to get through the taunt. But like we can see here, Battlemaster and Smite both do get the job done. Mighty with a swig of water will be very disappointed in himself, but you're absolutely right. It is all about focusing from here on out. You can't let it get to you. Honestly, this is one of the worst points in a series where it can happen, where it's just the second game. He still needs 2 wins ahead of him, but it's another skill set that players need to have, or rather another skill that players need to have to get that push to the back of your mind, focus only on what's in front of you right now, and then you can hit yourself in the head later on when you're done with the series.
I mean, that's right. Like, his job here is not to play well. It's not to impress anyone. It's just to win. That's all he wants to do. A win is a win. I don't care if he plays like absolute garbage. Not that he has, although that Miss Lethal was not amazing, of course. He just needs to get the win. That's the important thing here, and a win is a win, as I said. So heading into Game 3, he can try to restabilize himself again. As we said, just make sure he's checking these things, doing his Hearthstone homework that you have to do every single turn with these types of decks in checking for lethal, because the important thing is still Druid has not won a game. And so the Rogue and the Hunter still available for Mighty to be able to try and take a win with. And as we've said multiple times, Hunter, fantastic matchup into Druid because of that Trog that we know so well. The Quest Rogue still potentially a little bit harder of a win to get over here for Mighty.
Yeah, it's true. There is going to be some mind games here with the Q Order, honestly, because if Alutemu can sneak the win with the Demon Hunter in against the Hunter, then suddenly the Rogue might not have a good target left over for Mighty, and that is the something of a downside for the hybrid approach that Mighty has gone for with his lineup, where it does rely a little bit on mind games, although he does afford himself more percentage against matchups that are also mutually aggro, and then you have the Quest Rogue, which is just a good one to have. But Mighty does get the one he wants to see here, the Hunter through the Druid, and if he does take the matchup that he expects to win, suddenly the Rogue is in with a favorable and a Druid matchup, which is not terrible either. And that's another Trog!
It is another Trog. Oh my god, I was gonna say, but there's the Lunar Eclipse for Alutemu, but he gets the bloomin' Gordon as well, and the Neophyte, and the Imprisoned Felmore. This is just the absolute cocoa nuts when it matters the absolute most.
Oh, Alutemu with the wins. Still good-natured, still smiling, but this is a problem. Okay, he can hero power it, and Lunar Eclipse it next turn, even if there's Neophyte, right? Currently, Mighty doesn't have a buff for the Trog. So Alutemu will tank a lot of damage in the meantime. But if he wants to, he can set up the clear. He will be very afraid of Doggy Biscuit. And if that is drawn for Mighty, or if Alutemu thinks it's in hand immediately, then the hero power feels very much moot. So there is a line where you just accept as early as now that you're going to let the Trogs multiply and play your regular game plan of trying to ramp into scale. But Alutemu, for now, is still going to take the shot that there's no buff spell.
Just needs to dodge the biscuit here, and he's absolutely fine. Felmore, Neophyte, whatever. Hero power can still be used to take out the Trog next turn, and then as long as there's no second Neophyte, he can go Lunar Eclipse plus the Overgrowth on the same turn, leading up gorgeously into the Scale of Onyxia, which in this game, I do think will actually be able to stabilize him.
Right. Mighty knows he doesn't shut down any important breakpoints by playing Neophyte. Like, if they wanted to play Wild Growth that turn, let them. You're getting a Trog. So Alutemu now has the capability of hero powering, like you said, into a potential Overgrowth, but we can see the Neophyte will stop that. Alutemu, I don't think, can afford to play around Neophyte. Not that he has any options to play around it. He just has to hope that he can clear to the finish line, which is that Raid Boss Onyxia. He has a very clear win condition in hand, but he needs the mana and the time to get there. Oh my god!
I was gonna say that this is still not the end of the world for Alutemu, because he's got Lunar Eclipse plus either Moonlit Guidance or Guess the Way, which is still just playable on this turn, I believe. However, with that Trog, it means he can't even take off the 3 damage. He has to prioritize 1 damage clear instead, which of course makes the Neophyte so much more threatening on this turn. He's also presented with a whole load of garbage off of this Discover. He wanted Innovate, he wanted Lightning Bloom, basically any way to cheat out this Raid Boss Onyxia just a smidge earlier.
Yeah, if he had picked up Bloom, Scale was actually playable on the next turn because I think Mighty's going to go for Wrangler over Neophyte here. It's not guaranteed though because Wrangler in this instance doesn't actually afford him immediate damage that's more than Neophyte. I'm still looking at Neophyte to shut down specifically Lightning Bloom Scale. If you give them another dead turn, this damage on board just kind of gets there alongside the quick shot hero power. So I do like this deviation from Mighty to simply playing on curve. Alutamu, really no good outs here. I think we're going very swiftly to Mighty on the Quest Rogue having to take a win versus either the Demon Hunter or the Druid. And that's the Bloom. That is what Mighty played around.
Absolutely heartbreaking for Alutemu. Overgrowth just leaves him dead on board, right? Yeah, he can't play that. He has to go Moonlit Guidance and...
Lunar Eclipse is
Pouch.
playable. No,
Yeah, Pouch is playable, but there's nothing you can get. You could lower Deskimp's win rate if you really want to by just playing that on 0 mana. But I think that's the only victory that you're going to get in this instance.
Oh, quick as you like. Trog Neophyte got the job done. 2 games for Mighty. Very, very clean. However, the last deck he's down to, this is the one that's not the pure aggro deck. This is Quest Rogue. There is no Trog in here. There's still Neophytes, but it is slightly slower than the Paladin and the Hunter so far, and Alutamu has taken unfavorables against Quest Rogue before.
Yeah, I mean, both of those games, I think Alutemu was winning very easily if there wasn't specifically Trog and Neophyte, or even just Trog alone in both of those games. Like, he had a good hand 2 games in a row. Early Guff, Overgrowth both times, Lunar Eclipse ready to take out some minions. It wasn't like he was just drawing all the dead cards. It's just because Mighty drew the absolute stone cold nuts 2 games in a row, even with a missed lethal along the way, that he was able to take the win. But like you said, the Quest Rogue left over, which is left with a good and a bad in the form of the Druid and the Demon Hunter. Again, Druid not a terrible matchup, especially when you slot in those Neophytes, which make for such a nice inclusion to just double down on the board-based approach, which is where Druid really does struggle. But even having said that, I think if Alutemu gets a hand anywhere near as good as he got in the last 2 games, this is looking extremely winnable for him.
Yeah, against Rogue, you definitely have way more time to ramp up to those real win conditions. If anything, the struggle point for Alutamu is the Demon Hunter, which is also not the most impossible matchup in the world. Double Lunar Eclipse starting hand looks premium against aggro decks, but again, we've laid it out. Quest Rogue is not a bona fide aggro deck. In this meta, I truly believe you need to run Trog to be called an aggro deck. It is still able to hit nice fast curves, but generally not enough pressure to put Druid off of just going for ramp, 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 and then sealing the game with an early Onyxia or Kazakhstan.
I do like in the end going for the Iron Bark there. I was considering the, Force of Nature? Is that what that card's still called? Just for the bunch of 2/2s to fight back on the board. But it's a little too slow. I think if you're winning this game, you'll have found something better to do by that point anyway. And so instead, just taking that and probably, I want to say, going for Moonlit Guidance next turn, because you can still then hit Overgrowth on 4, which is the important thing. And there's a couple of 2-mana cards that you can hit that become better in the form of Second Guidance or Guess the Way as well, to be able to get the second copy in hand as well.
It's really close, because if you Moonlit now and hit Wild Growth, you can play that next turn. It is just a 1-of, though, for Alutamu.
That's true.
But, like, every turn doing nothing, essentially, feels really, really bad into Quest Rogue. There's also the Neophyte to have to contend with, which is another reason, I suppose, to hold on to the Moonlit Guidance, because you would rather maintain that Nature Studies discount if you expect a Neophyte. Mighty, and Foxy Fraud, that's an insane pickup. He can just curve out amazing stats straight away. Coin, Foxy Fraud, SI7 Agent into Smuggler, which is obviously not going to have a huge summon just yet, but it's a curve. It's progressing the quest. Seems good to me.
That's better than getting the Neophyte down on the turn where they're going to play Overgrowth, most likely.
True, true.
Close.
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole 3 less attack if they don't specifically have it. But if they do top deck Overgrowth on that very turn, then this play starts to look an awful lot juicier.
Is this just like the B-roll for the Neophyte card reveal, where we've seen it and the top deck Overgrowth and the top deck Bloom for Scale of Onyxia are both shut down? This is insane.
Yeah, this script is getting a little bit unbelievable, guys. Let's try and spice it up a little bit over in Europe. But it's still not bad for Alutemu. He's facing pressure, but very far from killing him right now. Overgrowth now, absolutely fine. Leading up into, hopefully, a Cenarian ward. If he goes Moonlit Guidance into Bloom, the turn after, he can then, of course, go Bloom, Solar, Cenarian for a very, very strong play against a board which still is not killing him, as scary as this pressure is.
Yeah. And Gyro Blade is technically 6 damage, but I would say that a minion would be scarier here for Alutemu. Spyomatic, of course, because it would make his next draw much worse than average. And then the Mole, which is also just pressure on board. Bog Beam
Bog
times
Beam
2
is pretty huge, yeah. I mean, Pouch is interesting, of course, because you can go Pouch for a 4-drop minion and then just Iron Bark it up and then get another Pouch for a subsequent turn. But I just think the double clearing potential of Bog Beam is too tempting, especially when Iron Bark is just good with Cenarian Ward still next turn.
Oh man, but I'm also still tempted by Pouch because the double Bog Beam is floating so much mana. That is obviously not the straight up correct way to think about it.
No.
Probably just close your eyes, get rid of the immediate threats. Don't play risky with having mediocre discovers from the Pouch, and then go for exactly the game plan you laid out. Cenarian Ward, Iron Bark. Most of the outcomes, of course, still got punished by the Assassin, but Alutemu once again has a very clear finish line in mind. Just bridge the gap until Onyxia, and that's usually enough of a board presence that the Quest Rogue cannot answer everything all at once. The Scabs pickup allows for some very interesting lines here. If you coin Scabs, Smuggler is free, Assassin is playable, Tenwu, you lack the mana to then bounce and replay whatever you get. Oh wait, no.
If you don't play the Assassin, then it's playable, yeah.
Yeah, oh that's insane.
Okay, pretty underwhelming first minion, but it starts to ramp up quite significantly at this mana break point.
Oh my god, Dark Moon statue! That's just a raid leader.
Premium.
And straight up damage. Nothing could stop me from just sticking this on the operative and pushing 2 more.
Delve the statue, is that ridiculous to keep it from ever dying? It's probably not dying anyway, but I don't know.
I mean, you can turn it into a battle statue too with that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I want to hear that voice line.
Fair enough. I have no idea in the world what it says.
Me neither. But here we go. Cenarian Ward finally available for Alutemu. Can, of course, start with the nature studies, but I doubt you're going to find anything better. But Iron Bark, oh, gorgeous way to fill out some of that remaining mana just to apply an even bigger taunt if that were needed.
Mighty, I think, held on to the generator as a combo activator for the Assassin, which looking at it in retrospect is very smart, but not the Witch. That's a terrible outcome. Does Mighty just win on board? 7, 9, 11, 15 attack. No, it's not quite lethal.
Not far off though, is it?
Yeah. Very close.
20. Yeah, I just count straight up 20.
Does he have any top decks for immediate lethal? I assume Alutemu was just going to Iron Bark this
Yeah.
twice to be as safe as possible. I don't think he ever wins in a world where there's Assassin, so...
But you can save it for Mali next turn, right? Or if you get Innovate off the top to go raid boss Onyxia and then taunt it up as well. Like, honestly, you can't taunt the Onyxia because Immune doesn't work that way. But, you know, just some way of putting up some extra taunt in the way.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So if Mighty goes for Passage, does he have any immediate lethal outs? He does not play Wicked Stab, so probably just, yeah, take the Assassin route, Redagger after this. Oh man.
It's
Even
so
an
close.
Onyxia bloomed out or Vated out for Alutemu next turn does not feel particularly safe.
It does not. I don't think Malagos, even with the 15 health it provides him on board, will be enough to stabilize against all this pressure, especially when Secret Passage is the one remaining card. And so for Alutemu, he can go for an 8 cost here off the pouch, but what could that even be?
Orchfiend?
I mean, it has to be like Cenarian into Forge Fiend, something like that, right?
Yeah, because if there's Forge Fiend, it can die perfectly to 8 damage on board, and then there's still 14 that can go face, and Alutama would only go up to 11, so that's not an out. I'm not seeing it, Derek. If he solar pouches, he can get 2 6s. Obviously, only one of them playable. And there's nothing on 6 that I can think of either. I mean,
Yep.
Arcanist doesn't really work here because he would have to hero power the Tanu and he would die if he hero powers something. Oh, man.
He still has another Iron Bark in his deck, so he could go Malagos double Iron Bark, but instead he's digging with the pouch, gets himself a bunch of minions that are just not doing enough. Supreme Abyssal, I think, has got to be the pick here just because it puts 15 health in play. But if we start to add up, it's not enough, and Alutemu knows it.
That's exactly right. Alutemu throws it down. That's a heartbreaker for him. Once again, so close to Worlds, but Mighty with the hybrid aggro lineup takes it 3-1. Fast as you like. Absolute relief for him there. I'm sure he himself will not be perfectly happy with the pan out of that series, but the ultimate result is that he is going to Worlds.
That's right. That's all you're here to do, is to win a few games of Hearthstone, and that is precisely what Mighty has done. Huge congratulations to him. I think he's been a really positive addition to APAC Grandmasters. And even though, Gia, I know you and I are both trying to contain our heartbreak at having to see Alutemu get another second place when it matters most for him. It's happened in 2 Masters Tours now, and playoffs here again in his final ever game of Hearthstone Grandmasters. He can hold his head high, as I think for the last 3 years he has consistently set the standard, not for Asia Pacific, but for the world overall, as to how competitive Hearthstone should be played.
God, don't make me cry, Derek. It's actually the end.
That's it.
It's just it. I mean, such huge congratulations to Mighty, of course. He just came here as a new Grandmaster out of nowhere, got the 2nd seed when nobody expected anything from him. He's just been the underdog consistently, but time after time, week after week, has been bringing the secret spice lineup. I think lineup building is truly one of Mighty's strengths here. He hit the aggro lineup that also has teeth against other aggro. That's why he took such a convincing victory over Alan, and kind of noted that Questrogue is just kind of all around a pretty good bring these days, even though it's not necessarily favored against Druid. Let's say he lost that game, he was still ending up with a favorable into Demon Hunter. You lose some percentage on the hard target on Druid, but you give yourself a more flexible target on the field as a whole. Mighty, not the cleanest series once again, but when we have seen him perform at his best, truly some inspired plays there. And I think with this huge win under his belt, finally, like his first big tournament victory, I want to say, that's going to be a huge confidence booster as he prepares for the World Championship much later on in the year.
That's right. This honestly, to me, feels very reminiscent of Bank Yugi's first season in Grandmasters, where he also came in as kind of a newcomer, not especially well known, also qualified through to the World Championships in his first series, and also kind of had a bit of a messy final, if we're being perfectly honest, between both of these players, where the nerves was clearly getting to them, because this is by far the biggest stage that our players have ever competed on. But that is nothing compared to what Mighty is going to have to be playing later on in the year in the World Championships. I hope he can have a slightly better run than the other player I just compared to in Bank Yugi, who did not manage to get especially far once he made it through to the World Champs. But for the moment, he can just bask in his glory. He has done it, and he is going to be the first player of the year guaranteed that spot in the World Championships. But we still have to find out who the other 2 remaining players joining us shall be, one from Europe and one from Americas. But I believe, even though I am now taking a bit of a leave from competitive Hearthstone, waiting until my next gig at the later on at the seasonal championship. Not doing the next Masters Tour. We do have some other exciting stuff coming up. But first of all, we can get a few words from Mighty, I believe, who is standing by. Mighty, can you hear me, buddy?
Hi, Darok. Yes, I can hear you. Hello, how are you? Oh, holy shit. Am I audible?
Well, pretend that isn't the first thing you've said live on camera in Grandmasters. As, oh man, what a series. What can you even say about that?
Okay, so in the first game, I actually kept the cards. Like I knew I'm gonna like not do Neophyte on 2, and like I'll do it on 3, and then like stop the direct up and everything. And then I was so nervous, I just tunnel visioned and I just threw the Neophyte on the board, and I was like, holy fuck, did I just do that?
Okay. That's strike number 2. We're going to ask for no more swear words in this one, buddy. But overall, I've got to say...
I'm on... sorry.
No worries.
Sorry.
Don't apologize at all. It's totally fine. But I just want to say,
Shit.
without explaining anything that happened, how are you feeling? What is your mindset now that you have qualified through to the World Championships?
This is the best I've felt in so long. Like, I put so much work into this. Like, the last month has been... It's been one incredible ride.
Yeah.
What can I say? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that says it all right there in terms of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Now talking a little bit about your strategy to get here. We know it's been an up and down ride over the course of Grandmasters, but talk us through your lineup preparation this week. What led you to this aggro lineup, but with Quest Rogue in there as well, which feels like a little bit of an odd deck to include?
Okay, so a friend and I, we usually work together for lineups for the Master Store. So like we 1 week before MTs, we sit down and like analyze the data from the Master Store qualifiers and see what are the most popular brings, like what are we expecting the field to be. So this time, like it was pretty obvious. The field was going to be Fell Demon Hunter and Ram Druids. So thought, can we build 4 decks that kind of soft target both of those? So we kind of like, okay, Paladin does that. Sure, Paladin does that. Face Hunter beats Druid, but it doesn't beat Demon Hunter. So how do you do that? Okay, what about if we went back to 1-year-old builds? Like we played Moonfang, we played Felmaw. We just cut the Rhinos which are bad in that matchup. Sure, we tried that matchup and it worked. It like that Face Hunter list is favorable into Fell Demon Hunter. Like we were beating them. Then we were like, okay, the 4th deck was questionable. Quest Rogue is like very 50-50 into both of those matchups we are kind of targeting, but we couldn't find any good 4th deck which does the thing we were trying to do. So like I saw the replays from yesterday's games, and like I'm one of those Quest Rogue enjoyers. Like I think it's slightly favored to both Druid and Fell Demon Hunter. Yeah. So yeah, the lineup just came together, and then we tried it for the MT, and it kind of just like it worked. I took the same lineup into the MT. I just like swapped like 5 cards. In the MT, it didn't quite work out so well because I faced like 2 mirrors and my opponents had Trogs, and then I faced 2 full control lineups, which this lineup obviously cannot beat. But coming into this week, I had again a pretty good read.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Gia and I can agree, even though there were obviously a couple of shaky moments in the series there, your overall lineup preparation felt absolutely spot on, and you put yourself in such a good position overall. But speaking of those moments, I don't want to bring it up when it's too fresh here, but what was happening?
It's okay.
There? Because how did it come up, basically?
Yeah, I was playing.
I
was playing so well, and the nerves just got to me, man. Like I'm not used to being in such high pressure situations and such high stakes situations. Still new to it, getting used to it. Hopefully this changes over time, because I know I'm a very good player. But sometimes I'm prone to these kind of moments where like my brain just completely freezes, and then I realize like I need to kind of like people have told me this before. Yeah, I need to think out more about my turns a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's an entirely different game when you're playing on ladder versus playing in the tournaments. But I know for me personally, I think it's fantastic that we're finally getting to see a little bit more of the Indian Hearthstone community represented here at the top level of competitive Hearthstone. And can you speak a little bit about how like you said, your practice partners, or how the Hearthstone scene is over in India, and what support you've had to get you through here to Grandmasters?
The Hearthstone scene in India is not very good. Like till last year, we had just 1 player competing. He's my very good friend, and he's the friend I work lineups with. GCT Theatre, shout out to him.
Oh, great! Yeah,
very good player, and he has been my prime practice partner for like 1 year now since I started, playing in these qualifiers and in these MTs, and we work together. And looking at us, a lot more people have started playing Hearthstone, like trying competitive Hearthstone. Like we have a lot of casual players, obviously, but like some people are now venturing. Also, the Asian Games are coming up, and hurdle event in Asian Games, so that's hopefully a big push. I'm gonna try for that as well. It would be nice to win both worlds and Asian Games, and obviously the world champion has to be like APAC from APAC, third year in a row, right?
Obviously, we want to see it. But now that you are the world champion, I just want to give you the stage to say whatever you want, any shout outs, any thoughts running through your head. As long as you keep it PG, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, shout outs to a lot of people. So my practice partners, obviously GCT Third and another Indian player, Raptor. They have helped me like practice for these GM matches, and then a player from Japan actually helped me a lot. I hope I pronounce his name correct because I just called him Ku. It's Nemu Kuma, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really good. Like he's amazing. Also, Digo helped me a lot in aggro mirrors and everything. Who else? Obviously, shout out to Prancing Pony of Pony Dojo, who actually helped me strategize and stuff. I joined Pony Dojo a while back. Even Lambi and Bankyugi, they welcomed me into GM like I've been here for years. Very nice people, like very good people, very good friends of mine. Also, another player I want to shout out to, who was my major practice partner these last 2-3 days, for the final week, Fire Noodle. Some shout outs to some people.
Awesome. Love to hear it. And I think I might also have misspoken a second ago where I said now that you are the world champion. I'm also clearly a little bit overexcited about an APAC player being the world champ 3 years in a row. But yeah, now you're through to the world championships, I should say. Of course, another huge congratulations. I think you'll be a... We'll get there. We'll get there. I believe in you, buddy, as you are through to the world champ. So congratulations again. And, well, we'll see you very soon, I'm sure, as you are guaranteed that spot in the world champs.
We will. You'll be seeing more of me. I plan to compete, obviously, in the Masters Tour. Last call is coming. I'm excited about last calls. Honestly, one more thing I want to say. Like, if someone had told me 1 year ago I'd be at this stage, I'd just have laughed them off. Like, what are you even talking about? And here I am. Oh, I'm just super excited, man.
Yeah. We're all very proud of you. Well done. And thank you very much for your time. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Darok. And also, one more shout out before we go.
Hey, last one.
Being the best casters ever. Obviously, have been a fan watching you guys cast APAC GM. Best casters ever.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. You're very, very sweet. And I feel bad, but now I am actually going to cut you hard off as I'm being told by production. That's enough. You've had all your time, Mighty. And we'll see you at the World Champs. Thank you very much. And goodbye.
All right. See you, man. Bye-bye.
What a guy!
Right, not Alutamu fans anymore. He hasn't complimented us that heavily.
Yeah, Alutehu. Imagine.
Mighty said so many memorable things there and a lot of censorable things too. But honestly, the thing that stuck with me most is how confidently he said, I know I'm a good player. Yeah. It happens to the best of us that you make some mistakes there. And I love to hear that from players because it's so often that we see some players too far on either end of the spectrum that they're downplaying themselves too much or they're overhyping themselves and don't look at their own mistakes. Mighty, I think, is right there in that sweet spot where he knows at his best he is an excellent player, such a great work ethic and a great lineup he built as well. And he also still knows how to criticize himself and not let it shake his confidence. I think an absolutely deserving champion and maybe a world champion if you're manifesting, Dark.
I believe, Gia. It's happened twice already. We may never get an MT victory despite having 10 out of the 8 final spots in a Masters Tour like we had last time. We still can take World Championship after World Championship. And I think Mighty is going to be a very worthy addition indeed. So, as I said before I thought we were going to go to the outro previously, I'm all done with competitive Hearthstone for a little while until the other standard championships come up. But I believe going to give you a chance to plug now, Gia. You have a little something coming up yourself very soon.
That's right. Next weekend, April 2nd to 3rd, is Lobby Legends, the very first premier Battlegrounds esports event that I will be casting alongside none other than Celissa, Battlegrounds superstar streamer and frequent competitor herself. We get to see 16 players from all around the world. It wasn't honestly planned that 12 of the players for each would come from APAC, EU, and Americas, but it panned out that way, and we'll be joined by 4 players from China, and we get to see who the very best Battlegrounds player is, and I'm so excited to see. And there's tons that we can't quite share yet, but I think this production is going to be something that everybody is looking forward to. So I really hope that you will continue to join us here on YouTube and other platforms.
Yep, indeed. I will be watching very closely along with my notepad to try and boost my MMR to more than half of yours, as I believe it currently roughly is, Gia. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for watching Grandmasters this weekend and, of course, over the last few years, as this is really the end of an era now. We've sent our final world champion through from APAC Grandmasters. Next season, Grandmasters Last Call is going to be, as we said, all the regions joined together. But for Grandmasters as we knew it, this was it, and what a way to close things out with Mighty getting that spot in the World Championship. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Now we're going to send you over to Europe with Raven and Sottle, where we will find out our second player going alongside Mighty through to the World Championship. So thank you once again so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.
He's fist pumping, he did it! Oh my gosh.
72 damage both times. Both times he left damage on the board.
Oh no! Why are his cards green? Right, but why are his cards green? He got there! Oh. Sick! It's so powerful, all these rushes. I can't even believe the value he's got.
Labby with a pop-off. Well-deserved. He stays in for another series.